the wedding night. He erased me, and the empire I built from the ashes. They said yes to each other under 2,000 white roses. 6 hours later, he slid divorce papers across a marble table and told her he'd never loved her, not for a single second. He'd married her to settle a war. Now he wanted her gone before sunrise because the woman he did love was waiting 3 floors below in the same hotel. Lena Voss walked into that penthouse a bride. She walked out a ghost in a $10,000 dress. But ghosts, it turns out, learn to haunt. Before we go any further, if you're watching from New York, from Houston, from a small town nobody's ever heard of, from anywhere at all, drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. Hit the like button, stay with me all the way to the end, because what Lena becomes by the final chapter is something none of them, not Adrian, not his family, not the men who laughed at her behind closed doors, ever saw coming. Let's begin. The elevator hummed on its way to the 42nd floor, and Lena Voss stared at her own reflection in the polished brass panel, trying to recognize the woman looking back. The dress was heavier than she'd expected. Ivory silk, hand-beaded across the bodice, a train that had taken 2 girls to manage all evening. Her hair was still pinned the way the stylist had left it 6 hours ago, though a few pieces had come loose during the last dance and now framed her face in a way that looked deliberate, almost styled, almost careless. Her lipstick was gone, her feet hurt. There was a smudge of someone else's cologne on her collarbone from a hug she couldn't remember receiving. She was 26 years old. She had been married for exactly 7 hours and 42 minutes. The elevator chimed. "After you, Mrs. Cade." The doors slid open, and Adrian was already standing in the foyer of the penthouse with his back to her, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of something amber. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't looked at her since they'd left the ballroom. She told herself he was tired. She told herself a lot of things on the ride up. "It's cold in here," she said, because the silence was too big and someone had to put a word in it. "I'll have them fix it." He still didn't turn. She stepped out of the elevator, lifted the train of her dress with one hand, and walked past him into the living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out on a city that glittered like it was in on a secret. Somewhere down there, the guests were still drinking champagne she had picked out. The band she had argued for was still playing. A 3-tiered cake that had cost more than her mother's funeral was being cut into slices and boxed up for people who would eat it at their kitchen counters tomorrow morning in their underwear. "Adrian." "Sit down, Lena." She turned. He had finally looked at her, and something in her chest tightened the way it had the first time she'd stood in front of a hospital room and known, before anyone said a word, what was on the other side of the door. "What's wrong?" "Sit down." "You're scaring me. I'm asking you to sit down. I'm not going to ask again." She sat. The couch was white, low, the kind of furniture that was designed to be looked at and not used. Her dress pooled around her legs like something that had been spilled. Adrian walked to the sideboard and refilled his glass without offering her one. He took his time with it. He always took his time with everything. "There's a folder on the table," he said. "I need you to read it." "What folder?" "The one on the table, Lena." She looked. There was a folder on the glass coffee table in front of her. Black leather. Expensive. The kind of folder a lawyer brings. She had not seen him put it there. He must have set it out before they left for the church, before she'd walked down the aisle, before she'd said, "I do" in front of 400 people and meant it with every cell in her body. Her hands didn't want to open it. She made them. Inside were 18 pages of legal paper. The first page said "Dissolution of Marriage" in block letters across the top. Her name was typed out in full. Lena Marie Voss. His name was typed out in full. Adrian Thomas Cade. There was a line at the bottom already signed in his handwriting. The ink looked fresh. The ink looked days old. She couldn't tell. Her ears were ringing. She could hear it very clearly, a high, thin tone, like a television left on in another room. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." "Adrian, don't cry. Please, if you cry, I'm going to have to sit through it, and I have somewhere to be." She looked up. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, and she had spent 18 months studying his face. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even coldness exactly. It was the look a man gets when he is waiting for a difficult phone call to end. "You married me this morning." "I did. In front of my mother, in front of your mother, in front of 400 people." "I'm aware." You danced with me. Adrian, you cried. During the vows. I saw you. I know what you saw. Then what is this? He took a sip of his drink. She watched his throat move. She had kissed that throat 100 times. She had fallen asleep with her ear against it and listened to him breathe and thought, this is the safest place in the world. This is the only safe place there is. The marriage had a purpose, he said. The purpose has been served. It's done now. You're going to sign those papers and you're going to leave tonight. And tomorrow morning my people will make sure everyone understands it was a mutual decision. You'll be taken care of. There's a number in the folder. You won't have to work. You won't have to worry. A purpose. Yes. What purpose, Adrian? He set the glass down. It made a small, clean sound on the marble. You know who my father was. You know what he left me. When he died, there were debts, not money, other kinds. The Delmar family controlled a piece of the port that I needed. Your uncle controlled a judge I needed. Marrying you resolved both problems in a way that nobody could object to, because it looked like a love story. It was a love story. No, Lena, it wasn't. She laughed. She didn't mean to. It came out of her like a hiccup, sharp and wrong, and she clapped her hand over her mouth and stared at him over her fingers. You're joking. I'm not. You're joking, Adrian, because I know you, and I know I'm in love with someone else. The ringing in her ears got louder. What? I've been in love with her for 9 years. She left the country when my father was still alive because he wouldn't have allowed it. She came back 2 weeks ago. I didn't know she was coming back. If I had known, I wouldn't have gone through with today. I owe you that honesty, at least. You owe me. Her name is Sienna. She's downstairs in a suite on the 39th floor. She's been there since 5 this afternoon. Lena's throat did something she couldn't control. A small, wet sound came out of it. She looked down at her lap, at the dress, at the beading she had picked out in a shop in Milan with her mother holding her hand and weeping because her father hadn't lived to see this day. And oh God, her father. Her father had walked her down the aisle in a photograph she'd had printed and framed and set on a chair in the front row, and Adrian had touched the frame before the ceremony. He had touched it. He had said he would have been proud of you. He had, you monster. I'm not a monster. I'm a man who made a choice. 2 choices, actually. The first one was to marry you. That was a mistake. The second one is to be honest with you about it before we're a week in, and this becomes something we can't clean up. A week? I'm trying to be decent about this, Lena. You're trying to be decent. She was standing now. She didn't remember standing. The folder was in her hand and she was looking at it like she had never seen paper before. Like the concept of a document was brand new to her. You stood in front of a priest. Yes. You put this ring on my finger. Yes. You told my mother you would take care of me. You told her that, Adrian, at the rehearsal dinner, in front of my aunt. You put your hand on her shoulder and you said, I'll take care of her, Mrs. Voss. I promise you I will take care of her. Do you remember saying that? I remember. And you meant none of it. I meant it in the way I could afford to mean it. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He picked up the glass again and walked to the window and looked out at the city, and she stood there in her wedding dress in the middle of a room she was never going to sleep in, holding 18 pages of paper that were going to end her life as she had understood it up to that point. Adrian? Yes. Look at me. He turned. Did you ever love me, even a little, even for an afternoon? He was quiet for a long time. She would think about that quiet later, on nights when she couldn't sleep, on mornings when she caught her own reflection in a window and didn't know what she was looking at. She would turn that quiet over in her hands for years. She would decide eventually that it was the closest thing to an honest answer she ever got from him. I liked you, he said. I thought you were very smart and very beautiful, and I thought you would be good for the family. I was fond of you. I still am. Fond. That's the word, yes. You were fond of me. Lena. Say it again. Say it to my face. Say it where I can see your mouth. I'm not going to say it. The word came out of her so loud it shocked both of them. He flinched, just a little, just at the edge of his eye. She caught it and stored it. Later she would wonder if that was the first moment, that flinch, the first seed of what was to come. Something in him had given a half inch, and something in her had measured it. I was fond of you, he said. I'm sorry. She looked down at the folder. The ring on her finger caught the light. It had belonged to his grandmother. 3 carats, emerald cut, set in platinum. He had told her the story of it on their third date. She had cried then, too, because she had thought it was a story about how love outlasted the people who held it. She slid the ring off her finger. She didn't hand it to him. She set it on top of the folder very carefully, the way you set down something breakable. I want my things. They're being delivered to the apartment in the morning. What apartment? The one in the East building. It's been arranged. You'll be comfortable there. My lawyer will call you on Monday. I don't want an apartment of yours, Adrian. It's not mine anymore. The deed is in your name. It was going to be a wedding present. Take it. I'd rather you took it. I don't want anything that came from you. Then you'll be on the street by Tuesday, and I'm not going to let that happen because I'm not a monster, whatever you think of me tonight. Don't tell me what you are. She walked past him. She did not look at him. She got to the elevator and pressed the button, and it opened instantly. Because of course it did. Because he had called it while she was still standing there trying to understand her own marriage. And she stepped in and turned around. And there he was, her husband of 7 hours and 48 minutes, standing in the middle of the white room with his drink in his hand and a face she could not read. Adrian. Yes. I hope she's worth it. He said nothing. I hope you look at her one day and you know exactly what you traded for her, and I hope it ruins you. The doors closed. She made it to the lobby before she broke. She made it all the way through the revolving door and onto the sidewalk and 15 steps down the block before her legs stopped working and she sat down on a low concrete planter outside a closed flower shop, and she cried in a way she had not known a person could cry. The kind of crying that is not a performance and not a release. The kind that is just a body getting rid of something it cannot hold. A cab stopped. The driver was an older man in a Mets cap. He rolled down the window and looked at her, the dress, the face, the no coat in November. Ma'am, I don't have any money. Ma'am, where do you need to go? I don't know. Okay, he said. Get in. We'll figure it out. She got in. She didn't know why she got in. She told him an address, the address from the folder, from a slip of paper Adrian had tucked inside with the deed. And the driver nodded like it was the most ordinary thing in the world and pulled into traffic. And she pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the city go by. And somewhere on the FDR, she realized she had left the ring on the folder on the table. And she did not care. She would never care. She hoped it sat there until the penthouse burned down. The apartment was in a pre-war building on the east side, quiet street, a doorman who did not ask questions and did not make eye contact. She would learn later that he had been told not to. She would learn later that everyone in that building had been told not to. Adrian was careful about things like that. Adrian was careful about everything, which was, she would come to understand, the whole problem. The apartment was on the 9th floor. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that had been renovated in the last year, and a window that looked out on an air shaft. The furniture was generic, rented probably, or bought in a single afternoon by an assistant who'd been handed a credit card and a square footage. There was a refrigerator with nothing in it. There was a bed made up with white sheets. There was a closet full of her clothes, which meant someone had been in her old apartment, which meant someone had packed her things while she was saying her vows, which meant the decision had been made before the ceremony, had been made days ago, maybe weeks, maybe from the beginning. She sat on the floor of the living room in her wedding dress and did not move for a long time. The sun came up eventually. She was surprised by it. She had expected the night to last longer. Her phone had been in a clutch at the reception. Someone had put the clutch in the closet. She found it, turned the phone on, and watched it light up like a slot machine. 43 texts, 19 missed calls. Her mother, her aunt, 3 of her bridesmaids, a reporter from a paper she had never heard of. Her mother again. Her mother again. Her mother. She called her mother. Lena, Lena, where are you? Where are you? I've been calling since 6. Your aunt says she saw Adrian in the lobby with a woman, and I told her she was imagining things, but she swears, Lena. She swears. Mom. And then I called Adrian's mother, and she wouldn't come to the phone, Lena. She wouldn't come to the phone. What is happening? Mom, stop. Her mother stopped. Lena closed her eyes. She could see her mother in the kitchen on Long Island, in her robe, holding the phone with both hands, the way she always did when she was scared. She could see her mother's hands, the veins on the backs of them, the small brown spots her mother hated, and Lena had always secretly loved. He ended it. What? He ended the marriage. Last night, in the penthouse. He had papers ready. He had an apartment ready. He's in love with someone else, Mom. He's been in love with someone else the whole time. Her mother did not say anything for a long moment. And then her mother made a sound Lena had heard exactly twice in her life. Once when the doctor had come out of the emergency room to tell them about her father, and once when her grandmother had fallen down the basement stairs, and Lena squeezed the phone until her knuckles ached and said, Mom, don't do that. Please don't do that. I told you, Mom. I told you, Lena. I said that family. I know. I said it. I said, I know you did. You were right. Oh, sweetheart. I'm okay. You are not okay. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. I need a minute. I need to not talk to anyone. I need to think. Can you do that for me? Can you just tell everyone I'm fine? Tell them we had a fight. Tell them anything. Just give me a week. Lena. Please, Mom. Where are you? Somewhere safe. Is it his? Yes. Come home. I can't come home, Mom. Not yet. If I come home tonight, the whole neighborhood will be on the porch by tomorrow. Her mother was crying. Lena could hear it. She could see it. She pressed her forehead against the cold wall of the apartment and closed her eyes and said, Mom, I love you. I'm going to call you in 2 days. I'm going to be fine. I promise you, I'm going to be fine. She wasn't sure if it was true. It didn't feel true. It felt like something you said because the person on the other end of the phone needed you to say it. She hung up and she sat on the floor, and she did not move again for a very long time. She took the dress off that afternoon. She had to cut one of the laces in the back because she couldn't reach it, and there was no one to ask. She used a kitchen knife. She held the blade carefully between 2 fingers, and she sawed at the silk ribbon until it gave, and then she stepped out of the dress and left it in a pile on the bathroom floor, like a dead thing. She showered for a long time. The water ran hot and then cold and then hot again. She washed her face twice. She washed her hair. She stood under the spray with her eyes closed and tried to remember what her voice sounded like when she laughed, and she couldn't. That frightened her more than anything that had happened in the penthouse. She got out. She put on jeans and a sweatshirt from the closet. Someone had actually packed her favorite sweatshirt, the gray one with the hole in the cuff, which meant someone had been in her drawers, and she stood in the middle of the bedroom holding the cuff and shaking for a full minute before she could put the sweatshirt on. She made herself eat a slice of bread she found in the kitchen. There was no butter. She ate it dry. She drank a glass of water. She threw up the bread and the water in the kitchen sink, rinsed the sink, and made herself eat another slice. This, she would learn, was how a person survived the first week. In slices of bread, in glasses of water, in small acts of mechanical obedience to the body that had, for reasons no one could explain, decided to keep going. Well, on day 3, a man came to the door. He was thin, 60s, a face like a retired school teacher. He wore a brown coat and carried a briefcase, and when she opened the door 2 inches on the chain, he held up a business card and said, Mrs. Cade, my name is... Don't call me that. He lowered the card. Ms. Voss, he said. My apologies. My name is Paul Albright. Your husband, your former husband, has retained me to handle the paperwork on your behalf. I'm not his attorney. I was hired specifically for you. I work for you now, if you'll have me. If you won't, I'll leave and I'll refer you to 3 other firms, none of whom have any connection to the Cade family. It's your choice. I'd like to come in and talk. I'm willing to do it in the hallway, if you'd prefer. She looked at him for a long time. He waited. He did not seem in any particular hurry. Something about him reminded her of her high school guidance counselor, a man who had told her, at 15, "You are smarter than you think you are, Lena, and the day you figure that out is going to be very bad for somebody," and she had laughed at the time and never forgotten it. She took the chain off. Come in. He came in. He took off his shoes at the door without being asked. He sat at the kitchen table and opened his briefcase, and he laid out a set of documents that were different from the ones Adrian had put in front of her at the penthouse. These documents were longer. These documents had more of her name on them and less of his. The apartment, he said. It's yours. Free and clear. There's a trust that will cover maintenance and taxes for 30 years. After that, you'll own it outright, and what you do with it is your business. I don't want it. I'd encourage you to want it. Why? He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. Miss Voss, I've been doing this work for 41 years. I have watched a great many women in your position refuse what was offered to them because they felt it was tainted. Every single one of them has regretted it within 18 months. The people who did the tainting don't suffer from your refusal. You do. Take the apartment. It isn't a gift. It's a settlement, and you earned it the hard way. She looked at the papers. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat on the table so he wouldn't see. What else? A sum of money. Substantial. I won't insult you by naming a figure out loud. It's on page 6. You have until the end of the year to decide whether to accept it. If you don't accept it, it goes back into the estate. If you do, it's untouchable. No conditions. No non-disclosure. You can go on television tomorrow and tell anyone you like about everything that happened this weekend, and the money stays in your account. That's not possible. It is. I drafted it myself. I wouldn't represent you otherwise. Why did he agree to that? He didn't want to. I insisted. He needed me to sign off on it for reasons that don't matter to this conversation. He signed what I put in front of him. She stared at him. The man did not look away. He had very pale blue eyes, the kind that looked like they had seen a lot of things and stopped being surprised by any of them sometime in the 1990s. Why are you doing this? Because I was hired to. That's not the whole answer. No, he said. It isn't. He closed the briefcase halfway, and then he opened it again, and then he looked at his own hands on the table for a moment and said, more quietly, my daughter was married to a man like him, a long time ago. It didn't end the way this is ending. I think about her every day. I take on cases I shouldn't take on because of her. If that's an unsatisfying answer, I apologize. She did not know what to say to that. She said nothing. He closed the briefcase the rest of the way. Read the documents, Ms. Voss. Call me Monday. My personal cell is on the back of the card. Don't sign anything tonight. Don't sign anything this week. Wait until your hands stop shaking. They'll stop eventually. They always do. He left. He put his shoes back on at the door. He did not offer to shake her hand, which she was grateful for because she did not think she could have taken her hand off the table. She did not sign anything that week. She did not leave the apartment that week either. She watched television without sound. She slept in 2-hour blocks. She ate bread and eventually eggs she had delivered from a bodega around the corner. The delivery man was a teenager who called her miss and did not look at her face, and she tipped him $10 every time because it was the only human transaction she had, and it felt like something she should pay for. On day 8, she put on real clothes and walked to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. She did not get coffee. She sat by the window and watched people go by and tried to remember how to be a person in a room full of other people. A man held the door for a woman with a stroller. A girl dropped a pastry and picked it up and ate it anyway and laughed about it with her friend. 2 old men were arguing in a language Lena didn't speak about a newspaper one of them had folded wrong. The world was still happening. She had forgotten that it would. She stayed for an hour. She did not cry. She walked home and she slept for 6 hours straight. And when she woke up, it was dark and she was hungry, and she thought, for the first time in a week, about what she was going to do next. Not tomorrow. Not this week. Next, in the bigger sense. The rest of a life she had not planned to be living. She did not have an answer. But the question had shown up, and that was more than she'd had the day before. The envelope came on day 12. It was slid under the door sometime between 3 and 6 in the morning. No stamp, no return address. Thick cream paper, her name on the front in a hand she didn't recognize. Just Lena, no last name, as if last names didn't apply anymore. She opened it at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold next to her. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 6 lines of type. Ms. Voss, Paul Albright speaks highly of you. I don't know if that's a compliment, given how little Paul speaks at all. I have an office on 47th Street. If you are willing, come on Thursday at 2 p.m. and we can talk about what comes next. There is no obligation. If you don't come, I won't contact you again. M. Hale. Below the signature, a street address. Nothing else. She read it 3 times. She turned the paper over. The back was blank. She put the paper down. She picked it up. She put it down again. Thursday was 4 days away. She spent those 4 days in a state she would later describe to the only person she would ever describe it to as the last version of myself I didn't like. She was afraid of the paper. She was afraid of going. She was afraid of not going and spending the rest of her life wondering what the paper had been. She called her mother twice and did not mention it. She called Paul Albright once, from the hallway of the building, and asked him, without preamble, who is M. Hale? And Paul Albright was quiet for a long time, and then he said, a decent man, as far as I can tell, which in my line of work is the highest grade I issue. Go if you want to, don't go if you don't. I can't make that call for you. And then he had hung up, and she had stood in the hallway holding a dead phone and thinking, nobody in my entire life has ever said I can't make that call for you to me before. And something about the sentence had gone through her like a small, clean current. On Thursday morning, she showered. She put on the nicest thing in her closet that wasn't from the wedding, a black sweater, gray slacks, flat shoes. She did her hair in a low knot. She did not put on makeup. She looked in the mirror and she saw, for the first time in 12 days, a woman she almost recognized, which was not the same as recognizing her, but it was closer than she had been. She took a cab to 47th Street. The address was a narrow building between a jeweler and a shuttered restaurant. There was no sign on the door. She checked the number twice. She rang the buzzer. A voice she didn't know said, "Third floor, Ms. Voss, take the stairs, the elevator sticks." She took the stairs. Her legs shook on the second landing. She made them stop shaking on the third. The door at the top was open. Inside was a single large room with tall windows, bookshelves from floor to ceiling on two walls, a worn leather couch, a desk, and at the desk, a man in a charcoal sweater who was writing something by hand on a yellow pad. He did not look up when she came in. He finished his sentence. He put the pen down. Then he looked up. He was 40, maybe 45, brown hair with a little gray at the temples, a face that was not handsome, exactly. His nose had been broken at some point and never quite set right, but a face you would remember. Quiet eyes. The kind of stillness that did not come from peace, the kind that came from practice. Ms. Voss? Mr. Hale. Marcus is fine. Marcus. Please sit down. She sat on the couch. He did not sit behind the desk. He came around it and sat in a chair across from her, forearms on his knees, hands loose between them. He did not offer her coffee. He did not apologize for anything. He did not look at her with pity, which she noticed immediately, and which she would later decide was the single thing that made her stay in the room. I'll be direct, he said. I'm going to ask you some questions. You don't have to answer any of them. If you get up and leave right now, I'll walk you to the door and hold it for you, and I won't ever bother you again. Is that acceptable? Yes. Good. First question. Do you know who I am? No. Good. I'd have been worried if you did. Second question. Do you know why you came here today? She thought about it. She had thought about it the whole cab ride. No, she said. Not really. Also good. Third question. He paused. He looked at her for a long moment, and she had the distinct sense of being measured, not weighed, measured, the way a tailor measures a length of fabric before deciding what it can be made into. What did you do before you met Adrian Cade? She blinked. What? Your job, your life. Before him, I worked for a research firm. I was an analyst. I looked at companies before people bought them. I was good at it. I was going to make director in another year. I quit 8 months ago because Adrian said because we were getting married, and he said there was no need, and She stopped. Her throat had done something without permission. She swallowed. Go on. I let him talk me into it. I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. But you did, and that's not the part of this story that matters anymore. She looked at him. He was looking back. Not warmly, not coldly. Just looking. The way a person looks when they are genuinely paying attention, which was, she was beginning to realize, something that had not happened to her in a very long time. What do you want from me, Mr. Hale? Marcus. What do you want from me, Marcus? He leaned back a little. He picked up a pen off the low table between them and turned it once in his fingers and set it down. I run a business, he said. It's a consulting business. On paper. In practice, it's something a little more complicated than that. And I'm not going to pretend with you because you'll find out anyway, and I'd rather not start this relationship, if we have one, with a lie. I advise people. Sometimes the people are companies. Sometimes they're families. Sometimes the families are the kind of families your former husband belongs to. And sometimes the advice is the kind of advice that keeps those families from eating each other alive. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm very good at it. I don't take on many clients, and I don't take on many employees, and I'm not in the habit of writing letters to women I've never met. Then why did you write one? Because Paul Albright called me. He told me he didn't know you. He didn't say that. He said he couldn't make a call for you. What he was doing when he said that was making a call for me. Paul has a number of irritating habits, and one of them is that he won't recommend anyone for anything out loud. What he does is mention them to you twice and wait to see if you notice. He mentioned you to me twice. Why? That, Marcus said, is an excellent question, and the honest answer is that I don't know yet. But I trust Paul, and I trust my own reading of a room. And I have been in this room with you for about 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes I have watched you stop your hands from shaking twice, straighten your back once, and ask me 2 sharp questions instead of falling apart, which is what 90% of the people who walk through that door do in the first 5 minutes, whether they're widows or CEOs or men who have just been arrested. That means one of 2 things. Either you are in shock and you will break down in the cab on the way home, which happens and is nothing to be ashamed of, or you're a person who functions under pressure and you have spent the last 12 days discovering that about yourself for the first time. I'd like to know which one it is. I'm willing to give you a few weeks to find out. She stared at him. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a conversation, several conversations. At the end of them, if we both think it makes sense, I will offer you a job. Not a glamorous job. You will do research. You will read documents. You will tell me what you see in them that I don't. You will be paid well, because I pay everyone well, and because you will earn it. You will not work for Adrian Cade, directly or indirectly. You will not be asked to do anything that puts you in a room with him. That's a promise. I put it in writing when you sign, if we get there. Why would you promise that? Because I understand what happened to you, and because I have no interest in being a stepping stone between the worst night of your life and the next worst night of your life. If you come to work for me, you come to work. You don't come to be rescued. I'm not in the rescuing business. I'm in the observing business. What I observe is that you have a mind that someone bothered to train, and that mind has been sitting in a rented apartment for 12 days eating bread and watching the ceiling. And that's a waste. I hate waste. She didn't say anything. She wasn't sure she could. You don't have to decide today, he said. You don't have to decide this week. Take my card. Think about it. Call me when you've thought about it. If you never call, I wish you well, and I mean that. He reached into his breast pocket and held out a card between 2 fingers. She took it. There was a number on it. Nothing else. No name. No company. Just a phone number in the same hand as the letter. Marcus. Yes. Why do you hate waste? He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face did a thing she couldn't name, a tiny adjustment, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. She was watching for it. She had learned to watch for it in the last 12 days, the way a person whose house has been robbed learns to watch every door. Because I was raised by people who threw things away, he said, and I have spent my entire adult life picking up what they threw. He stood up. She stood up. Ms. Voss. Lena is fine. Lena, go home. Eat something with protein. Sleep if you can. Don't answer your phone for anyone whose name ends in Cade. I'll be at this number when you're ready. She walked down the 3 flights of stairs and out onto the street, and she stood there for a full minute on the sidewalk with the card in her hand and the cold cutting through her coat. And she realized she was not crying, and she was not shaking, and she was not, for the first time in 12 days, afraid. She was something else. She wasn't sure what to call it yet. She put the card in her pocket and she started walking. She walked the whole way home. 31 blocks. She did not take a cab. She did not stop at the coffee shop. She walked past a bridal store on Fifth Avenue without looking in the window, and she walked past a bar where a man she had gone to college with was having a drink by himself and did not see her. And she walked into her building and nodded at the doorman and took the elevator to the 9th floor and unlocked the apartment and sat on the couch in her coat. And she took the card out of her pocket and looked at it, and she put it on the coffee table in front of her, face up, number showing. She did not call him that night. She did not call him for 6 more days. But the card stayed on the coffee table, face up, number showing, and every morning when she walked past it on her way to the kitchen to boil water for tea, she saw it. And every morning she did not move it. And every morning, the apartment felt a quarter-inch smaller, and the city outside the window felt a quarter-inch closer, and somewhere, in a part of her she had not yet learned the name of, something that had been lying very still for 12 days opened one eye and began, slowly, to pay attention. Somewhere across town, in a penthouse she would never see again, Adrian Cade was pouring a drink for a woman who would, in 11 months, break his heart in a way he was not prepared for, in a way he would not recover from, in a way that would one day be told and retold in rooms he would not be allowed into. He did not know that yet. He thought he had won. He would have a little while longer to think so. She called him on the 7th morning. She had woken up at 4 without meaning to, which had become a habit, and she had lain in the dark for an hour watching a square of streetlight move across the ceiling. And then she had gotten up and made tea and sat on the couch with her knees drawn up under her sweatshirt, and the card was still on the coffee table face up. And she had looked at it the way a person looks at a door they have been circling for a week. And she had thought, if I don't do it now, I'm going to keep not doing it, and that's going to be its own answer. And I don't want that to be my answer. She picked up her phone. She dialed. It rang twice. Marcus Hale. It's Lena Voss. Good morning. I'm sorry. Is it too early? I've been up since 4. It's fine. Have you had breakfast? No. Have breakfast. Then come to the office at 10. We'll talk. He hung up. No pleasantries, no confirmation, no looking forward to it. Just the dial tone and a kitchen that suddenly felt very small around her. She stared at the phone in her hand and she laughed. Once, a short dry sound that surprised her, because it had been a laugh and not a sob, and she had not known she still had laughs in her. She made eggs. She ate them. She put on the black sweater again because it was the only thing she owned that felt like armor, and she took a cab to 47th Street, and she climbed the 3 flights of stairs, and she knocked on the open door, and Marcus Hale was at the same desk in the same charcoal sweater, and he did not look up, just said, "Sit. I'll be a minute." She sat. He finished what he was writing. He capped the pen. He came around the desk and sat in the same chair and looked at her the same way he had looked at her the week before, which was, she realized now, his default way of looking at anything. Close attention without judgment, which was so rare in the circles she had been moving in for the last 2 years that she'd forgotten it was available. You came back. I came back. Why? Because I didn't want to be the kind of person who doesn't. He considered that. Acceptable answer, he said. Let's begin. He slid a folder across the low table. Not black leather this time, just a manila folder creased at one corner with a paper clip on the front holding a sticky note that said LV in blue pen. Open it. She opened it. Inside were printouts, corporate filings, a quarterly report, a news clipping, a photograph of an industrial facility from the air. She recognized the format. She had made folders like this 100 times in her old life. Her hands knew what to do with it before her brain did. She took the clip off. She laid the pages out in order. She started reading. Marcus did not speak. She read for 11 minutes. He didn't interrupt. He didn't watch her, exactly. He looked out the window for most of it, at a pigeon on the fire escape across the street, and he let her work. When she set the last page down, she realized she had been leaning forward, and her tea, which someone had set by her elbow without her noticing, was still half full and still warm. Well, he said, this company is lying. Which one? The holding company on page 4, the one that bought the facility in Newark. They're reporting the purchase price as 11.2, but the facility was valued at 19 last spring by the county assessor. Either they got the deal of the century, which is not impossible but would have made the trade papers, or the real price was paid somewhere else, under a different name, and this is the cover number. I'd want to see the assessor's records and the title transfer history. I'd also want to see who's on the board of the holding company, because if any of those names show up on the board of the seller, the whole thing is self-dealing and the 11.2 is a tax fiction. She stopped. She had not meant to say that much. Marcus Hale was looking at her, really looking. For the first time since she'd walked into the room, he was not doing the measuring thing. He was doing something closer to listening, and it was unsettling in a way the measuring had not been. How long did that take you? 11 minutes. I gave that folder to a man I've worked with for 9 years. He came back in 2 days with a 30-page memo that said the same thing you just said, badly. Oh, you start Monday. That's it. Paperwork's with Paul. Salary's on page 2. If you want to negotiate it with Paul. If you want to negotiate hours or title or anything else, negotiate those with me. I'd recommend you negotiate the salary. Paul likes when people do. Lena? Yes. You don't have to say yes today. You can take the folder home and read everything twice and call me on Sunday. I'm saying yes. Then we're done here. Go home. Don't tell anyone. Not your mother, not Paul, not anybody. Not because there's anything secret about it, but because for the next 6 weeks you're going to want one thing in your life that nobody has an opinion about yet. Trust me on that. Go. She stood. Her legs didn't shake. That surprised her. She was at the door when he spoke again. Lena. She turned. You're going to be very good at this. How do you know? Because you read those documents like you were hungry. People who are hungry are very good at this. People who aren't. It's the only rule I've ever found that holds. She nodded. She went down the 3 flights of stairs. She did not take a cab. She walked 40 blocks home in the cold with her hands in her pockets. And somewhere around 34th Street, she realized her jaw had unclenched for the first time in 2 weeks. And somewhere around 20th Street, she realized she was smiling. Not at anything in particular, just smiling at the sidewalk in front of her. And she thought, God help me, I'm going to be all right. The work, when it began, was not glamorous. He had warned her it wouldn't be. He had not warned her how much she would love it. Marcus's office had 4 people in it, not counting Marcus. There was a woman named Denise who ran the front desk and the calendar, and Lena understood within a week most of the functional decisions of the firm, though her title was assistant. There was a man named Ray, who was 62 and had been a federal prosecutor for 30 years before his heart attack, and now sat in a back office reading the financial press and muttering. There was a younger man named Teo, mid-30s, quiet, who did something with databases that Lena did not fully understand, and who brought her coffee on her 3rd day without asking whether she took it black and was correct about the fact that she did. And there was Lena. On her first Monday, Marcus gave her a pile of annual reports and said, "Find me 3 things in here nobody wants me to find." She found 4 by Friday. On her second Monday, he gave her a deposition transcript and said, "Find me the lie." She found 2. On her 3rd Monday, he gave her nothing at all and said, "What do you want to look at?" She asked for the last 6 months of filings from a shipping concern that operated out of 3 ports she had not heard of before she started working for him, and he raised one eyebrow at her, just a 1/4 inch, and said, "Interesting choice," and left her alone with it for 9 days. At the end of the 9 days, she walked into his office and put a single sheet of paper on his desk. "They're moving money through a company that doesn't exist." "Show me." She showed him. He read it twice. He set it down. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he stood up and walked to the door and said, "Denise, call Ray in here. And Teo, and close the door behind you, please." That was the first meeting. There would be many. She had been at the firm for 5 weeks before anyone called her by her last name. She had been there for 7 before she realized, with a small cold shock one evening at her desk, that she had not thought about Adrian Cade in 3 full days. She put her pen down. She sat for a long moment in the quiet of the emptying office. Then she picked the pen up and kept working, because the alternative was to sit with the realization, and she was not yet ready to do that. She had lunch with her mother on the Saturday of the 8th week. They met at a diner on Long Island, the kind of place with a laminated menu and a waitress who called everyone Hon, and Lena's mother hugged her for a long time in the parking lot and then held her at arm's length and looked her up and down and said, "You lost weight." "I know." "Are you eating?" "I'm eating, Mom." "You're working." "I'm working." "I don't want to know where." "You don't want to know where. If it's clean, I don't need the details. If it's not clean, lie to me now, and we can go eat." "It's clean, Mom." Her mother looked at her for a long moment. Her mother had gray eyes that did not miss much, and had never missed much, and had been the first to know when Lena's father was sick, even though nobody had told her yet. Her mother looked at her now the way she had looked at Lena when Lena was 16 and had tried to sneak back into the house at 2 in the morning and said, "You're different." "Am I?" "You're quieter. You used to talk too much. You used to fill the room. You don't fill the room anymore. You sit in it. Is that bad?" "It's not bad. It's just different. I don't know if I did this or he did this, but somebody did it, and I want you to know I see it." "He didn't do it, Mom." "Lena." He broke something. Somebody else fixed it. That's a different thing. Her mother did not press. Her mother was very good at not pressing, which Lena had not appreciated when she was younger and appreciated enormously now. They went inside and ate pancakes, and Lena paid the check, and her mother pretended to be outraged about it. And then they sat in her mother's car in the parking lot for another hour and talked about nothing. The neighbors, a cousin's baby, a show her mother was watching. When Lena got out of the car, her mother rolled down the window and said, "Sweetheart." "Yeah. Whoever he is, the man who's paying you, tell him I said thank you. He's not, I don't care what he is or isn't. Tell him." "Okay, Mom." She walked to the train with her hands in her coat pockets, and she did not cry, and she did not feel anything in particular except the dull, low hum that had been her baseline for 3 months now, which was, she was starting to understand, not grief exactly, but the sound grief makes when it is walking away from you. She did not tell Marcus what her mother had said. She filed it. She had started filing things in the last few weeks in a way she had not done before. There was a part of her mind that had come online and was taking notes on him, on the office, on the rhythms of his voice, on the way he never answered a question the first time you asked it, on the way Denise brought him tea at exactly 10:15 every morning, and he never thanked her out loud, but always, without fail, left a small paper-wrapped chocolate on her desk on Friday afternoons. On the fact that he worked 14-hour days but never called anyone after 7 p.m. On the fact that there was a photograph in his desk drawer, she had seen it once when he'd asked her to find a file, of a woman holding a child, neither of whom he had ever mentioned, and the photograph had a small tear along one edge that had been taped back together, and the tape was old. She did not ask. She filed. At week 11, he called her into his office and said, "I'm sending you to Philadelphia for 2 days. You'll go with Ray. You'll sit in on meetings. You won't say anything. You'll watch people. When we get on the train home, you'll tell me everything you saw, and if you're as good as I think you are, you'll have seen something Ray didn't." "What are the meetings about?" "It doesn't matter. You'll figure out what they're about in the first 10 minutes of the first one. What matters is the room." She went. Ray wore a bad tie and complained about his knees for the entire Amtrak ride. They met in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building Lena would never find again if she tried. There were 7 men in the room and 1 woman. The woman spoke twice, briefly, and the men did not look at her when she spoke, which told Lena everything she needed to know about the woman's position, which was that the woman was the most important person in the room, and the men were pretending otherwise because they had not yet figured out what to do about it. On the train home, Lena told Marcus about the woman. Marcus laughed, a short, real laugh, the kind she had learned was rare from him, and said, "Ray, did you catch that?" "I caught a headache," Ray said. "Lena caught her." "Lena catches a lot of things," Ray said. "I'm going to sleep now. Wake me up in Trenton." Marcus looked at Lena across the aisle of the train. The car was mostly empty. It was raining outside. The window was cold against her shoulder. "That woman is going to run that organization within a year," he said. "I know. We're going to need to know her, quietly. I'll start a file." "You already started a file. I could see you doing it." "I did." "Good." He opened his book. He read for the rest of the ride. She watched New Jersey go by out the window, and she thought about the woman in the conference room, and she thought about her own face in the reflection of the train window, which she could see faintly against the dark, and she thought, "I am becoming someone." And the thought did not frighten her the way it would have 3 months ago. It did something else. It made her hungry. Adrian Cade during those weeks was not thinking about her. He had said that to Sienna in the penthouse the morning after the wedding, when Sienna had asked him, with her head on his chest and one finger tracing a slow circle on his sternum, "Do you think about her?" And he had said no, and he had meant it, and even if he hadn't meant it, it would have been the right thing to say. He did not think about Lena because there were other things to think about. His father's organization, which had come into his hands too quickly and with too many strings on it, was showing the first fine cracks that always show in structures built on a dead man's reputation. A shipment out of Baltimore had been late. A cousin in Queens had taken a meeting he had not been authorized to take. A man named Petrillo, who had been loyal to Adrian's father for 30 years and to Adrian for 18 months, had stopped returning calls on a Tuesday afternoon and no one could explain why. Adrian handled these things the way he had watched his father handle them. Firmly, publicly, with the kind of casual violence that was mostly implication. He broke a glass at a dinner in Bay Ridge, and 3 men went home and called their wives and told them to pack. He sat across from Petrillo in a booth at a restaurant on Court Street and spoke so quietly the waiter could not hear, and Petrillo came back into the fold by the end of the espresso. He felt, as he did these things, the same thing he had always felt when he did them, a low hum of competence, a rightness, the sense of a man doing the job he had been raised to do. He did not notice, because he had never been taught to notice, that none of it was actually working. The shipment out of Baltimore, the next one, was also late. The cousin in Queens was not taking meetings anymore, which should have been a relief but was not, because Adrian could no longer tell whether the cousin had been brought to heel or had simply gone quieter. Petrillo came to every meeting Adrian called, showed up on time, sat where he was told to sit, and somewhere around the 3rd month, Adrian began to feel, without being able to name it, that Petrillo was watching him, and the watching was not the old watching, the watching of a lieutenant looking at a leader, but the watching of an actuary, someone tallying a column. Sienna, in those months, was happy. Sienna was happy in a way that made Adrian feel when he came home at 11 at night to find her on the white couch with a glass of wine and her feet tucked under her, that he had done the right thing, that the wedding and the papers and the woman he had sent away in a cab had all been part of a necessary straightening of a bent life. Sienna laughed at his jokes. Sienna did not ask him about his day. Sienna, when he came home angry, did not ask him why he was angry, but took his coat and poured him a drink and sat in his lap and kissed the side of his neck until he forgot what he had been angry about, which he mistook at the time for a kind of love, and would later understand very clearly as something else. He did not understand then how much of what he had believed about himself had been scaffolding built by other people. His father had built some of it. His mother had built some. His uncles, his cousins, the men who had worked for his father and then for him, the priest at the parish on Henry Street who had baptized him and confirmed him and then eventually stopped returning his mother's calls for reasons Adrian never asked about. All of them had, over 35 years, built a thing called Adrian Cade, and Adrian Cade had walked around inside it his whole life without ever quite understanding that it was a structure and not a person. Lena had been one of the beams. He had not known that either. She had been, for the 18 months of their engagement, the thing that held a particular part of the ceiling up, and when he had pulled her out in a penthouse at 4 a.m. with a folder and a glass of scotch, he had not felt the ceiling sag, because ceilings do not sag immediately. They sag over months. They sag while you are at dinner, while you are in bed with a woman who laughs at your jokes, while you are sitting across from a man named Petrillo in a booth on Court Street, and by the time you notice, it is no longer a question of whether the ceiling will come down. It is only a question of which room you will be in when it does. Adrian in those months was in several rooms. He had not yet noticed any of them, but some. Lena saw him once, in the 6th month. It was at a benefit at a museum on the Upper East Side. Marcus had told her to come. Wear something black. Don't talk to anyone. Stand near me or near Denise. Don't drink the champagne. And she had come, and she had worn a black dress she had bought for herself with money she had earned. And she had stood near Denise for most of the evening, and she had been talking to a curator about a painting she did not particularly like when she had turned her head and seen him across the room. He had not seen her yet. He was at the bar with a woman on his arm. Not the woman from the penthouse, or perhaps the woman from the penthouse. She couldn't tell from across the room. She had never seen Sienna's face, and he was laughing at something a man in a gray suit had said. He looked the same. That was the worst part. She had expected him to look different. She had spent 6 months believing, without letting herself name the belief, that the earth would have marked him in some way, that his hairline would have receded, or his shoulders would have narrowed, or his laugh would have developed a thinness. And instead he was just Adrian, the same Adrian she had walked down the aisle toward, and he was fine, and he was laughing. Her hand did not shake. She noted that. She filed it. Denise was at her elbow within 10 seconds. We can leave. No. Lena. I said no. I'm fine. Don't hover. He'll notice if you hover. Denise, who had been doing this work in one form or another for 22 years, stepped back a half step and turned her body 3 degrees to the left, and became, through some trick Lena had not yet learned, no longer visibly attached to Lena at all. Lena admired it. She filed it. Marcus appeared on her other side. Do you want to leave? No. Do you want me to put a hand on your back? No. Do you want him to see you? She thought about that. She thought about it for a long moment. Across the room, Adrian turned his head to say something to the woman on his arm, and the light caught his jaw the way it had caught his jaw on the night of the wedding, and Lena felt, in her chest, something small and mean and old move and settle. Yes, she said. I want him to see me. But I don't want to cross the room. I want him to cross the room. He won't cross the room. He will if I don't look at him. Marcus looked at her, really looked. And he said, very quietly, You are a dangerous young woman, Lena Voss. I'm learning. Keep learning. He stepped away. She stayed where she was. She turned back to the curator, who had not noticed any of it, and she asked a question about the painting she did not care about the answer to, and she laughed at the curator's joke, which was not funny, and she stood with her back 3/4 to the bar, and she waited. It took 4 minutes. She felt him before she heard him. That was not imagination. She had learned in 6 months of watching rooms that you could feel a person approach from behind you if you had spent enough time in a room with them before, that some animal part of the brain recognized a gait and a breathing pattern and a weight. And Adrian's gait had been the gait she had walked next to for 18 months, and her body knew it before her mind did. Lena, she turned. She gave him exactly the face she had practiced in the bathroom mirror for 6 months without admitting to herself that she had been practicing. A mild, neutral, unsurprised face. The face of a person who has bumped into an old acquaintance at a dry cleaner's. Adrian, you look well. Thank you. I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't either, until yesterday. Who are you here with? Friends. He looked past her shoulder. She did not turn. She knew Marcus and Denise had, at some coordinated moment she had not seen, disappeared into the crowd. Adrian could look all he wanted. He would find no one. Lena. Adrian? I've wanted to call you. No, you haven't. I have. No, you haven't, and that's fine. You didn't owe me a call. I did, actually. We can agree to disagree. He was looking at her now with an expression she did not recognize. It was not quite the look he had given her in the penthouse. It was not the look he had given her during their engagement either. It was something in between, the look of a man who has just opened a drawer in his own house and found an object in it he does not remember putting there. Can I buy you a drink? No, just one. There's a lot to... No, Adrian, I'm working. Working. Yes. At a benefit. Yes. Doing what? Working, she said, and she smiled a small dry smile that was not for him at all, and she watched him try to figure out whether she was lying, and she watched him fail. Lena, I have to get back to the person I was talking to. Wait. Adrian, let me go. He had not touched her. He had not moved to touch her. But the word let had come out of her without her choosing it, and she watched him hear it, and she watched his face do something she had waited 6 months to see. It was a very small thing. It was a tightening at the corner of his mouth, a half-second of a flinch, the same flinch she had seen in the penthouse when she had screamed at him to say it to her face. She had catalogued that flinch. She had paid attention to it. She had been waiting, without knowing she had been waiting, for the second one. Here it was. I'm glad you're well, he said. Thank you. Really. I hope you're happy. I am. Good. Good night, Adrian. She turned. She walked. She did not look back. She crossed the gallery and she found the curator where she had left him, and she asked him another question about the painting, and the curator, who was slightly drunk now and did not know he had been a prop for the last 4 minutes, launched into an answer she did not hear a word of, because her ears were ringing again. Not the wedding night ringing, a different ringing, a sharper and cleaner one, the ringing of a bell that has just been struck for the first time. Marcus rematerialized at her side 15 minutes later. Well, how was that? Educational. What did you learn? She thought about it. The ringing in her ears had quieted. Her hands were still steady. Across the room, out of the corner of her eye, she could see Adrian watching her. Not obviously, but watching. And she knew with a certainty she had not had an hour ago that he would be watching her for the rest of the evening and would go home and think about her and would wake up in the middle of the night at some point in the next week and think about her again. I learned that he still thinks he's the one in the room who gets to decide when a conversation is over. And I learned that he's wrong about that. And what are you going to do with that information, Ms. Voss? She looked at him. Marcus Hale, who had pulled her out of an apartment and handed her a folder and a pen 6 months ago. Marcus Hale, who had never once, in 6 months, touched her hand, or looked at her the way men looked at women they intended to look at, or said anything to her that was not about work or about the world. Marcus Hale, who she had filed and filed and filed and still did not understand. I'm going to be patient, she said. Good answer. I'm going to let him make his own mistakes. I'm going to stay out of his way until he's made enough of them that nobody will defend him, and then I'm going to be in the room when he tries to defend himself. Better answer. I learned that from you. No, you didn't. You came in with that. I just let you use it. They stood there for another minute. The benefit wound down around them. Somewhere a quartet finished a piece and the room applauded and started to disperse. Adrian across the gallery said something to the woman on his arm and she laughed, too loud, the way a woman laughs when she has sensed a shift in the air and does not yet know what shifted. Lena. Yes. When we get back to the office on Monday, I'm going to put you on something bigger. Okay. I'm going to put you on the council. She turned her head and looked at him. The council? You know what I mean? I do. There are 9 people on it. None of them will like that there is a 10th. 7 of them will get over it inside a year. 2 of them will not. You'll know which 2 within the first meeting. You'll handle them. Handle how? That's up to you. That's the job. Why me? Because the last 6 months have been an audition, Ms. Voss, and you passed it. And because of the 9 people currently on that council, 3 of them were handpicked by Adrian's father, and 2 of those 3 are not going to be there much longer. And when they're gone, I want the replacement to be someone Adrian Cade will not expect. He'll expect me. He'll expect you to be angry. He'll expect you to want revenge. He'll expect you to do something theatrical. You're not going to do any of those things. You're going to sit in the chair and you're going to do the work. And by the time he understands what you are, he won't have a move left to make. That's not revenge. That's something else. I don't have a word for it. I have a word for it, she said. What? Consequence. He looked at her for a long moment. And then, for the first time in 6 months, Marcus Hale smiled at her. A real smile. Small, tired, something that had not been used in a while and creaked a little when he brought it out. It did not last long, but she saw it, and she filed it, and she tucked it away next to the photograph in his desk drawer and the chocolate he left on Denise's desk on Fridays, and the way he had said I was raised by people who threw things away, and she understood, in a way she had not understood before, that she was not being used. She was being built. She was being built by a man who had been raised in a house where things got thrown away, and who had decided, at some point in a life she did not know the shape of, to stop throwing things away, and to build instead. Consequence, he said. That'll do. They left the benefits separately, the way they always left things separately. Denise got a cab with Marcus. Lena got a cab by herself. The driver asked her where to, and she gave him the address of the apartment on the east side that she still thought of, sometimes, as Adrian's apartment, even though it had been in her name for 6 months. And even though she had, 3 weeks ago, finally taken down the generic art on the living room wall and replaced it with a single framed photograph of her mother and father on a beach in 1991, her father laughing, her mother mid-sentence, the sky behind them the kind of impossible orange that photographs only catch by accident. She had hung it herself. She had used a level. It was crooked anyway. She had left it crooked because she liked it crooked, because the crookedness was the part of the wall that belonged to her. The cab pulled away from the curb. She looked out the back window as they turned onto Fifth Avenue, and she saw Adrian standing on the steps of the museum with the woman on his arm, saying something to a valet. He was not looking at her cab. He could not have seen her through the tinted glass even if he had been looking. But she looked at him for as long as the angle held, and she took a small, quiet inventory of what she felt. And what she felt was not hatred, which surprised her, and was not grief, which surprised her more, and was not love, which did not surprise her at all, because that had been gone for a long time, and she had made her peace with it in the apartment, in the weeks of bread and tea and silence. What she felt was a cool, clean thing, very small, very dense, which she could not have named 6 months ago and which she could name now because Marcus Hale had said the word, and the word had stuck. Consequence. The cab turned. The museum disappeared. She settled back in her seat and watched the city slide past her window, and somewhere between 72nd and 68th, she realized she was tired. Not in the ruined way she had been tired in November, but in the ordinary way a person is tired after a long day of doing difficult work, and she closed her eyes for a few blocks and let the cab carry her home. And the driver, who had been driving for 31 years and had seen every kind of woman ride in his cab, glanced at her once in the rearview mirror and decided, correctly, that she was one of the ones who was going to be fine. She paid him. She tipped him well. She went inside. She took off the black dress and hung it up, and she stood for a long time at the window of her living room looking out at the air shaft, which was the view she had once thought was a cruelty and had come to understand, slowly, was only a view. And she thought about the council, and she thought about the two people who would not accept her, and she thought about Adrian on the steps of the museum, and she thought about the flinch at the corner of his mouth, and she turned off the lights and went to bed, and she slept, for the first time in 6 months, all the way through the night without waking up once. In the morning, she made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. The card Marcus had given her 6 months ago was still on the table where she had put it that first night, face up, number showing, but the number was in her phone now and she did not need the card anymore. She picked it up. She looked at it. She tore it in half and dropped it in the trash, not as a gesture, not meanly, just because it was finished, the way you throw away a train ticket after the trip. Then she went to work. The council met on the third Tuesday of every month in a private room above a restaurant in the West 30s, a place with no name on the door, and a staircase that smelled like wet wool and garlic. Lena walked up those stairs for the first time on a Tuesday in April, 6 months and change, after she'd walked out of a penthouse in a wedding dress. And she walked up them behind Marcus Hale in a navy suit she had bought on a Sunday afternoon with Denise, who had stood outside the dressing room and said, without looking up from her phone, the other one, the one that makes you look like you already own the building. She was 27 years old now. She had a birthday in February, and she had not told anyone, because she had not wanted the office to make a fuss, and Denise had known anyway and had left a single slice of chocolate cake on her desk in a paper box with no note. And Lena had eaten it at 4 p.m. at her computer while reading a quarterly report, and it had been, she thought, the best birthday she had ever had. The stairs creaked. Marcus didn't look back. Remember what I told you. Sit where I'm told. Don't speak first. Don't agree to anything. Don't disagree out loud either. If I have an objection, write it on the pad and slide it to you. And drink the water, not the whiskey. Good. And watch Petrillo. He glanced over his shoulder at her. Just a flick. Why Petrillo? Because he's the one who's going to try to smile at me the most, and I want to know why. Marcus pushed open the door at the top of the stairs. The room was bigger than she had expected. Long mahogany table, 10 chairs, a sideboard against the back wall with bottles on it, a single chandelier that looked older than the building. There were 7 men already seated when they came in, and 1 woman and an empty chair at the head for Marcus, which Lena noted because she had not known, until that moment, that Marcus sat at the head of anything. Nobody stood up. Evening, Marcus said. Marcus. Marcus. A chorus of flat greetings, 9 different men's voices saying the same word 9 different ways. The woman did not say anything. The woman was in her 50s, silver hair cut short, a gray suit, a face that looked like it had been left out in weather for a long time. She looked at Lena for exactly 3 seconds and then looked away. And Lena felt, accurately, that she had just been weighed and would be weighed again. This is Lena Voss. She's taking Corrigan's seat. Corrigan's dead a week, one of the men said. He was heavy, 50s, a face like a boxer who had stopped boxing 20 years before. That's fast. He's dead a week and the seat is empty for a reason, Petrillo. I filled it. Sit down, Lena. She sat. Marcus had put her at the middle of the table, on his left, 2 chairs from the end. Petrillo was across from her and 1 seat down. Petrillo looked at her. Petrillo smiled. There it is, she thought. Pleased to meet you, Ms. Voss. Likewise, Mr. Petrillo. I knew your husband. The room did not go silent because the room had been quiet to begin with, but something in it shifted. A held breath. A half second of attention. Marcus did not move. Marcus was pouring water from a carafe into a glass, and he did not look up. "I knew him too," Lena said. A laugh from down the table. A short one. The woman in the gray suit who had a low voice and an accent Lena could not place. Petrillo's smile did not change, but something behind it adjusted, the way a curtain adjusts when a window is opened in another room. "I meant no offense. None taken. It's a strange thing, a new face at this table. I imagine it is. I'll try to be useful." "Useful how, Ms. Voss?" Marcus set the carafe down. "Petrillo, we're not doing introductions tonight. We're doing the docs. You have a report. Give us the report." Petrillo looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back. It was a look Lena had not seen him give anyone before. It was not threatening. It was not even unfriendly. It was the look of a man who had already decided how a conversation was going to go, and who was willing, out of a kind of professional courtesy, to let the other person discover that on their own. Petrillo gave the report. Lena listened. She wrote nothing down. She had learned in 6 months at the firm that people relaxed when you did not write things down, and relaxed people said more. Petrillo's report was about the Port Authority at Bayonne and about a permitting issue that had, in Petrillo's framing, been resolved, and in Lena's hearing, been handed off to someone Petrillo did not name. She noted the non-naming. She filed it. Petrillo went on for 11 minutes. When he was done, a man named Marasco went next, about a trucking company in Elizabeth, and then a man named Chen, about a restaurant group in Flushing, and then the woman in gray, whose name Lena caught as Oriana, about a construction bid out in Nassau County that had gone wrong in a way that, from the sound of it, had cost somebody a great deal of money. Nobody asked Lena anything. Nobody addressed her. She sat and drank her water and watched 9 faces take turns becoming the face that was talking, and she watched 8 faces at a time arrange themselves into the faces that were listening, and she learned, in 90 minutes, more about the inside of that room than 6 months of reading reports had taught her about the outside of it. At the end of the meeting, Marcus said, "One more thing. Adrian Cade has asked for a sit-down. I told him he could have one 3 weeks from Thursday. He can bring one person. I'll be bringing 2. The room did not react visibly. Lena did not react visibly. Petrillo's eyes flicked to her and back to Marcus inside half a second. "What's he want?" Marasco said. "He didn't say. He'll say it on the night." "You're bringing her," Petrillo said, and tilted his head an inch in Lena's direction. "I haven't decided who I'm bringing. I said 2. That's all I said." Petrillo. Marcus. "You have something on your mind. Say it now." Petrillo smiled again. It was a softer smile this time, apologetic almost, the smile of a man who has been caught pulling at a thread and wants you to know he was only testing the weave. "I don't have anything on my mind. I'm an old man. I notice things, that's all." "Notice them quieter." "Yes, Marcus." The meeting broke up. Men stood, shook hands, drifted toward the sideboard. 2 of them took whiskey. 1 took nothing. Oriana took a glass of wine and carried it to the window and stood looking out at 9th Avenue without speaking to anyone, and Lena stood for a moment by her chair and tried to decide what to do with her body, which was what every new person in every room had to decide, which was, she had learned, one of the great secret questions of adult life. Marcus was at her elbow. "Walk with me downstairs." "Okay? Don't look at Petrillo on the way out. Look at Oriana. Nod to her. She'll nod back. That's the only goodbye you owe anyone in this room tonight." She did it. Oriana nodded back. Oriana's nod was slow and small, and it said, "I see you. I'll see you again. We'll talk when I decide to." Lena filed it. They went down the stairs. On the sidewalk, Marcus turned up his collar against the wind and said, without looking at her, "What did you get?" "Petrillo's been talking to Adrian, or to someone Adrian sent." "How do you know?" "The way he tested me. He wasn't testing to see if I'd flinch. He was testing to see if I'd already been briefed. He wanted to know whether you told me that he'd been talking to Adrian. You didn't tell me. He saw that you didn't. He'll go home tonight and report that I'm not being briefed. Which he'll believe means what? Which he'll believe means I'm decoration." I'd like to let him keep believing that for a while." Marcus did not smile. Marcus, in public, on a sidewalk, never smiled. But she felt the small internal shift of him being pleased, the way she had learned to feel these things, and she did not look at him, because looking at him would have been the wrong move, And she had, in 6 months, gotten better at not making the wrong move in public. Let him, Marcus said. Anything else? Oriana knows he's been talking to Adrian too. She wasn't surprised when he tried me. She was watching to see how I'd handle it. Good. That tracks. Anything else? The bit in Nassau County that went wrong. Oriana said it cost somebody a lot of money, but she didn't say who. I'd like to know who. I'll have Teo pull the filings in the morning. I'll pull them tonight. I'm not tired. He did look at her then, briefly. The streetlight caught the side of his face, and she saw the tiredness in it that she had only seen twice before. In the office, late at night, when he thought no one was watching. Go home, he said. Pull them in the morning. Marcus. Go home, Lena. She went home. She did not pull the filings that night. She ate a bowl of soup she heated from a can, and she watched the ceiling for an hour, and she thought about Petrillo's smile. And somewhere around 1 in the morning, she understood something that had been waiting at the edge of her mind all evening, which was that Petrillo had not been testing her. Petrillo had been testing Marcus. Petrillo had wanted to see whether Marcus would correct him, would snap at him, would defend her. Marcus had not. Marcus had only said, sit down and moved on, which was the answer Petrillo wanted, because the answer Petrillo wanted was that Marcus had brought her to the table for reasons that were not about Marcus, which was to say, for reasons that could be worked around. She lay in the dark, and she understood that she had been correctly underestimated. She had earned the underestimation. She had helped produce it. She fell asleep with the comforter pulled up to her chin and the small, cool feeling in her chest that had become, in the last month, the closest thing she had to joy. The sit-down was scheduled for a Thursday at 9 p.m. at a restaurant in Tribeca that had been closed for a private event, which meant closed for them. Marcus had chosen the place. Marcus had chosen the time. Adrian had agreed to both without arguing, which Lena, reading the note of the exchange Denise had typed up, had found interesting. The Adrian she had known would have argued for the sake of arguing. The Adrian she had known would have insisted on his own restaurant, his own hour, his own table. This Adrian had said yes on the first ask, which meant one of two things. Either he wanted the meeting badly enough to concede every small point, or he was being advised by someone who had told him to concede every small point. Lena thought it was the second. She thought the someone might be Petrillo. She did not say this to Marcus. She wrote it in her notebook and underlined it twice. On the day of the sit-down, she did not go into the office. Marcus had told her to stay home, to rest, to be ready. She walked to a coffee shop at 11 and sat for 2 hours with a book she did not read. She walked home. She ate a sandwich. She took a shower. At 7, she dressed, the navy suit again, a white blouse, low black heels, and she sat on the edge of her bed with her hands folded in her lap, and she rehearsed nothing because Marcus had told her not to rehearse, because Marcus had said, the version of you that shows up rehearsed is a version he'll recognize. And I don't want him to recognize any version of you tonight. The car came at 8:15. Denise was in the back seat. Denise was wearing a black dress and a pair of glasses Lena had never seen on her before. And Denise looked, for the first time since Lena had met her, like exactly what she was, which was the second most dangerous person in any room she walked into. You look good. Thank you. You're nervous. A little. Good. The day you're not nervous for one of these is the day Marcus fires you, because you've stopped paying attention. That's comforting, Denise. It's supposed to be. The car moved through the Holland Tunnel of the East River Bridge traffic. Lena couldn't tell which in the dark, and she watched the brake lights ahead of them blur and sharpen and blur again. And she thought, very clearly, I'm going to be in a room with him in 30 minutes, and I am not going to cry, and I am not going to raise my voice, and I am not going to do a single thing I have rehearsed, because I have not rehearsed anything. The car stopped at a corner in Tribeca. Marcus was already there, standing under the awning of a shuttered wine shop, hands in his coat pockets, breath visible in the cold. He got in. The car drove 2 more blocks and stopped again, in front of a restaurant with brown paper over the windows and a single bulb glowing above the door. Last thing, Marcus said. He's going to try to talk to you alone at some point. He's going to ask me if he can. I'm going to say yes. He's going to expect you to say no. Say yes. Go with him wherever he wants to go in the restaurant. Don't go outside. Don't get in a car. Don't go upstairs. The main dining room, the back of the main dining room, the hallway to the kitchen, those are fine. Anywhere else, you say no. Okay? He's going to try to apologize. Okay. He's going to try to apologize in a way that makes it sound like he's doing you a favor by apologizing. Marcus, I know what he's going to try to do. He looked at her. Yes, he said. You do. Sorry. I keep forgetting. They got out. They went in. Adrian was already at the table. He stood up when she walked in. She had not expected that. He stood up and his face did something she had never seen it do before, a small half-surprise, as if he had been told she was coming but had not fully believed it until the door opened. Beside him, a man Lena did not recognize was also standing, a young man in his 30s, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that lived its life inside spreadsheets. Not Petrillo. Interesting. She filed it. Lena. Adrian. Please. Sit. Marcus should sit first. Marcus sat. Denise sat next to Marcus. Lena sat across from Adrian, which she had not meant to, because the geography of the table had put her there without her choosing, and for a half-second she felt her composure slide by a degree, and she caught it, and she set her hands on the tablecloth the way her mother had taught her to set her hands on a tablecloth at 6 years old, and she kept them there. A waiter poured water. The waiter was the only staff in the restaurant. Lena noted that. The rest of the place was empty. Thank you for coming, Adrian said. You asked, Marcus said. I did. Then you're welcome. What do you want, Adrian? Adrian did not answer right away. Adrian was looking at Lena. She let him. She kept her face the way she had kept it at the museum. Mild, neutral, mildly curious, the face of a woman waiting for an elevator. I want to talk to Lena. You can talk to Lena when we're done talking about business. That was going to be my business. Marcus laughed. It was not a long laugh. It was not a loud one. It was a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was the closest thing Marcus did to one in a professional setting, and it cut through the room like a small, cold knife, and Adrian's jaw did a thing Lena saw. Adrian, let me be clear with you. You asked for a sit-down. I gave you a sit-down. I didn't give it to you so you could ask my colleague on a date. If you have organizational business to discuss, discuss it. If you don't, we can order dinner and stop pretending. Marcus. Adrian. Adrian took a breath. It was a small breath. She watched it go in and out. She watched, for the first time, the very faint movement under the collar of his shirt, the pulse at his throat, the small physical fact of him being under more pressure than he was showing. She had spent 18 months sleeping next to that throat. She knew what its ordinary pulse looked like. This was not it. There's a problem at the Bayonne terminal, Adrian said. Petrillo reports to me that it's resolved. Petrillo reports to you that it's resolved. Petrillo is lying. The permit has been pulled. The facility is going to be inspected next week. The inspection is going to turn up things that neither of us wants turned up. Somebody inside one of our organizations is feeding information to an assistant U.S. attorney in Newark named Gabriela Sosa. I don't know who. I have suspicions. I wanted to bring them to you before the inspection instead of after, because after is too late for both of us. The room was very quiet. Marcus did not look at Lena. Lena did not look at Marcus. Denise, on Marcus's other side, was writing something on a small pad with a pen Lena had not seen her take out. Nobody else moved. That's business, Marcus said. Yes, that's real business. Yes, Marcus, that's real business. I wouldn't have asked for the sit-down for a fake one. Why did you come to me? Because the last 3 of my people I've asked about this have told me it's handled, and I know it isn't, and I don't know which of the 3 is lying. I need somebody outside the circle to look at it. You're outside the circle. You've been outside the circle since my father died. I know why. I'm not going to argue about it. I need you to look at it. What do I get? I can give you the ports in Perth Amboy for 2 years. Quiet, not public. You'd run them through whoever you want to run them through. At the end of 2 years, we renegotiate. Marcus was quiet for a long time. He picked up his water glass. He drank from it. He set it down. He looked at Adrian the way Lena had seen him look at a man one time in his office, at a man who had tried to sell him a story that did not add up, and the man in the office had left the building within 10 minutes, and Teo had put the man's name on a list that Lena had, in 6 months, never seen used, but had also never seen crossed off. Lena will look at it, Marcus said. Adrian's face did a thing. Lena. Yes. I came to you, Marcus. You came to me for an outside pair of eyes. Lena is an outside pair of eyes. Lena is, I would argue, the best pair of eyes in this city for this kind of problem, and I would argue that without any knowledge of your particular history with her. She'll look at it. She'll tell me what she sees. I'll tell you what I decide based on what she tells me. That's the offer. You can take it, or you can call Petrillo and tell him you lost your nerve and go home. The word Petrillo did a thing to Adrian's face that Lena had not expected, and that she would later think was the single most useful thing she learned that evening. It was a flare, a very small one, gone in a quarter second. But she had been watching for flares, and she caught it, and she knew in the same second that Adrian had known for weeks that Petrillo was the problem and had been unable to say so out loud, and that now she had said it for him, or Marcus had said it for him. And something in Adrian that had been waiting for permission had been given permission, and something else in Adrian that had been holding the permission back had felt the loss of its grip. I'll take the offer, Adrian said. Good. Lena will be in touch through Denise. Denise will set a meeting. You will bring everything you have on the permit, on the assistant U.S. attorney, on the 3 people you asked who told you it was handled, and you will bring it to the meeting in paper, not electronically, and you will not make copies. If we decide to help you, we will help you. If we decide not to, we will return the paper and you will not see any of us again. And the ports in Perth Amboy will be a conversation we did not have. Are we clear? Mad. We're clear. Good. Order the fish. It's the only thing the kitchen does well when they're only cooking for 6. Adrian did not order the fish. Adrian did not order anything. Adrian's man in the wire-rimmed glasses ordered a glass of wine and did not drink it. Marcus ordered the fish. Denise ordered the fish. Lena ordered the fish. The waiter, who was not a waiter, nodded and disappeared, and they sat in silence for nearly 2 minutes, and then Adrian looked at Marcus and said, "Can I speak to her?" "You can speak to her where I can see you. In the back of the room. In the back of the room where I can see you." "Marcus, Adrian, she is an employee of mine. You will speak to her in a space of my choosing, in a duration of my choosing, and you will not touch her, and you will not raise your voice, and when she stands up, you will not follow her. If any of that is unacceptable, you will eat your fish and you will go home. Which is it?" "Acceptable." Lena. "Yes." "Your call." She looked at Adrian. She looked at him for the first time fully, face to face, in the light of the small lamp on the table. He had lost weight. She had not noticed at the museum because she had been too busy not flinching. She noticed now. His cheekbones were sharper. There was a gray hair at his temple that had not been there on her wedding day. The skin under his eyes was the color of a bruise that had been healing for too long. He looked like a man who had been told, at some point in the last month, something he was not able to forget, and he looked at her the way men look at the last person who was kind to them, which was, she understood, not a compliment to her and not a compliment to him, but simply a fact of the geometry of loneliness. 5 minutes, she said. 5 minutes. They stood up. They walked to the back of the dining room. There was a booth back there, against the wall, under a framed mirror that had something old and mottled about the silvering. She sat on one side. He sat on the other. He did not reach across the table. She noted that. Somebody had told him not to. He had listened. "You look good. You said that at the museum. I mean it more this time. Okay? Lena, Adrian, you have 5 minutes. You said you wanted to apologize. You don't have to. I don't want one. If you want to say something else, say something else." He looked down at the table. The mottled mirror behind him caught a ghost of her own face over his shoulder, and she saw it, and she saw that her face was very still, and she thought, "I have become a person who is still, and I did it without noticing. I was wrong." "Okay. I was wrong about who you were." "Okay. I thought I knew what you were. I thought I was being decent by telling you the truth, and paying for the apartment, and making it clean. I thought that was the kind thing. I told myself for 6 months that was the kind thing. It wasn't. I know it wasn't. I know that now." Adrian. "Yes. You don't know it now. You think you know it now because something else is going wrong. You think you know it now because Petrillo has been lying to you and because you can feel the floor moving under you. You don't know it. You've confused being scared with being sorry. They're not the same thing. I lived through one of them. I can tell the difference." His jaw moved. "Lena, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm telling you what I see." That's my job now. I see things. It's what I do for Marcus. You came here tonight to get me to see something for you, and Marcus said yes because he thinks I'm the best at it, which he tells me often enough that I'm starting to believe him. So I'm seeing you. I'm seeing the man across from me. I'm seeing that you haven't slept well in a month. I'm seeing that you've lost 8 pounds. I'm seeing that you've got a wedding ring on your right hand, which is not your ring finger, and I'm going to guess it's not the ring from our wedding either, so I'm going to guess it's hers. And I'm going to guess she gave it to you 3 weeks ago in a sentimental moment. And I'm going to guess you're wearing it the way a man wears a reminder, not the way a man wears a vow. How am I doing? He looked at his hand. The ring was simple, gold, a thin band. He did not speak for a long moment. You're doing fine. I'm not saying any of this to be cruel. I know. I'm saying it because you asked me at the museum if I was happy, and I said I was, and it was true, and I want you to understand what happy looks like on the woman you left, so that when you go home tonight and you lie in bed next to the woman you chose, you can do the math on what you traded, and you can sit with the number, and you can leave me alone. Lena. What? Will you look at the Bayonne thing? She almost laughed. It came up in her throat and she pushed it back down. I'm going to look at the Bayonne thing, Adrian, because Marcus told you I would. Not for you, for him. And if what I find is what I think I'm going to find, I'm not going to tell you first. I'm going to tell him first. He's going to decide what to do with it. If he decides to help you, you'll be helped. If he decides not to, you won't. That's not my call. That's his. I understand. I don't think you do, but it doesn't matter. She stood up. He did not follow. He had been told not to. He sat at the booth with his hand on the table and his ring catching the light, and she walked back across the empty restaurant to the front table where Marcus was eating fish and Denise was eating fish. And the fish, Lena noticed as she sat down, was actually quite good. She picked up her fork. She ate 3 bites. Marcus did not ask her what had been said. Denise did not ask her what had been said. The man in the wire-rimmed glasses did not look at her at all, because he was reading something on his phone under the table and failing to hide that he was reading something on his phone under the table. When Adrian came back to the table a few minutes later, he did not sit down. Marcus. Adrian. Thank you. Lena will be in touch. Good night, Lena. Good night, Adrian. He left. The man with the wire-rimmed glasses left. The waiter cleared the plates. Marcus set his fork down and looked at her and said very quietly, "Was that harder than you expected?" "No." "Was it easier?" "Yes." "That'll happen to you for about another year. After that, it just won't happen at all. It becomes a thing you did. It stops being a thing you do. I'm telling you so, you'll know to watch for it. Thank you. Denise." Note for the file. Lena handled Adrian Cade in the restaurant on April 22nd. Adrian left without complaint. Lena will take point on the Bayonne inquiry. I want Teo on it as second. I want Ray reading the AUSA filings by Monday. Noted. One more thing, Lena. Yes. Petrillo knows we met with Adrian tonight. Petrillo does not know what Adrian said. By Monday morning, Petrillo will be looking for a way to find out what Adrian said. I want you to let him find it. She looked at him. Let him find it. Not the real thing. A version, a wrong version. Something you're going to construct very carefully in the next 48 hours. Something that will make him comfortable, that will make him think Adrian came to me on a smaller matter, and that will make him not look harder. I want him relaxed. Relaxed is how he makes mistakes. I want his next mistake on record. Okay? Can you do that? Yes. How? Petrillo has a nephew who does data entry for one of Chen's restaurant groups. The nephew owes money to a bookmaker on 86th Street. I'm going to have a conversation with the bookmaker. The bookmaker is going to forgive the debt in exchange for a favor. The favor is going to be a phone call the nephew is going to overhear. The phone call is going to say what we want it to say. The nephew is going to tell Petrillo. Petrillo is going to believe it because it's going to come from a nephew who doesn't know he's being used. The car was silent for a long moment. Denise looked up from her pad. Jesus Christ, Denise said. Is that a problem? Lena said. No, Marcus said. It's not a problem. Do it. Use Teo for the bookmaker. Don't go yourself. If it works, I'll know by Wednesday. If it doesn't, we'll find out another way. It'll work. Lena. Yes. How long have you had that in your head? Since Petrillo smiled at me in the restaurant above the place on 34th. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. You've been working on him for 6 weeks and I didn't know. You didn't need to. I wasn't sure until tonight whether I'd need the nephew. I needed to see Petrillo's face when you said his name in front of Adrian. I saw his face through Adrian's face, which is a weaker reading, but it was good enough. It confirmed what I thought. Now I'll use the nephew. Marcus looked at her. He looked at her for longer than he had ever looked at her before. The car was moving through the Holland Tunnel now, the lights overhead flickering over his face in a steady rhythm, and she could see very clearly that something had changed for him in the last 10 seconds, and that the change was not small, and that he was not going to say anything about it tonight, but that he had noted it, and that he would, at some point in the next week or month, adjust the way he worked with her based on what he had just learned. You're going to have his chair within the year, he said. Petrillo's. Yes. Not Adrian's. Adrian's is someone else's problem, Lena. Petrillo's is yours. Okay? You understand what that means? I understand what that means. Say it out loud. She looked out the window. They were out of the tunnel now. The lights of the turnpike were ahead of them, and beyond the turnpike the lights of the river, and beyond the river the city again, lit up the way it always was. Indifferent the way it always was. The same city that had carried her home in a cab in a wedding dress, and the same city that was carrying her home now in a car with a man who had, 6 months ago, pulled her out of a life that had been ending and put her into one that had not yet been built. It means, she said, that by the time he understands what happened to him, I'll already be in the chair, and the chair will already feel like mine, and nobody in that room will remember a time when it wasn't. Good. Marcus. Yes. I'm not going to enjoy it. I know you're not. That's why I'm letting you do it. They did not speak for the rest of the ride. The car let her out in front of her building. She went upstairs. She took off the navy suit and hung it up. She washed her face. She ate a slice of toast standing at the counter because she had not finished the fish at dinner and her body had finally noticed. She got into bed. She did not sleep for a long time. She lay on her back and she looked at the ceiling, and she thought about Petrillo's nephew, whose name she did not yet know, and she thought about the bookmaker on 86th Street, whose name she did know, and she thought about Adrian at the booth with his hand on the table and his wedding ring on the wrong finger, and she thought about her own face in the mottled mirror behind him, which had been still, which had been very still, which had been the face of a woman she was still, on some nights, surprised to find she had become. Toward morning, she finally slept, and somewhere in the city, in a penthouse she would never see again, Adrian Cade sat on the edge of a bed next to a sleeping woman and looked at his own hands, and did not recognize them, and could not for the life of him remember when they had stopped being the hands he was used to. The nephew's name was Danny Petrillo, and he was 24 years old, and he lived in a 2-bedroom walk-up in Bensonhurst with a girlfriend who waited tables at a diner on 86th Street, and he owed a bookmaker named Sal Marone $19,000 on a series of parlays he had placed between Thanksgiving and the Super Bowl, which was, Lena would learn, the standard arc of a young man getting himself into trouble in that neighborhood. You started small at the holidays because your cousins were betting and you wanted to be in the conversation, and by February you were in for a number you could not say out loud. Teo handled it the way Marcus had asked him to, which was to say he did not handle it at all. He handed it to a man he knew, who handed it to a man he knew. And by the following Tuesday, Sal Marone had received a visit from someone Sal Marone could not afford to argue with. And by Wednesday afternoon, Danny Petrillo had received a phone call from Sal Marone telling him that his debt was forgiven, no questions, on the condition that Danny did one small thing, which was nothing, really. Just be at a certain restaurant at a certain hour the following Saturday and sit at a certain table and eat a plate of lasagna and listen. Danny sat. Danny listened. Danny heard 2 men at the next table. Men he did not recognize, speak in the low, serious way men speak when they are discussing something that matters. And what the 2 men discussed was a meeting that had happened in Tribeca on a Thursday night. And what they said about that meeting was that Adrian Cade had asked Marcus Hale for help with a zoning variance on a parking lot in Long Island City, and that Marcus had turned him down, and that Adrian had left the meeting embarrassed, and that the woman Adrian had been married to had been at the meeting only because Marcus had wanted to rub Adrian's nose in it, which was, Danny's table neighbors agreed, the kind of petty thing Marcus Hale did to people he did not respect anymore. Danny ate his lasagna. Danny paid his check. Danny called his uncle from the sidewalk outside because Danny loved his uncle and wanted, for once, to be the one with the piece of information that made his uncle take his calls. Petrillo took the call. Petrillo listened. Petrillo said, "Good boy, Danny. That's a good boy." And Petrillo hung up. And Petrillo sat for a long time in a leather chair in a room above a social club on 18th Avenue. And Petrillo thought about what he had just been told. And Petrillo, who had been on alert for 3 weeks about what had happened in that Tribeca restaurant, felt the small, sweet slackening of relief that comes when a thing you were afraid of turns out to be smaller than you thought. That was on a Saturday. By Monday morning, Petrillo was relaxed. By Tuesday, he had placed 2 phone calls he would not have placed if he had been careful. By Wednesday, Teo had both phone calls on a server in a building in Jersey City, transcribed, time-stamped, and indexed. And by Wednesday night, Lena had read them twice and placed them in a folder on Marcus's desk with a paperclip and a sticky note that said, in her own handwriting, "Not yet." Marcus read the folder. He did not ask her what "not yet" meant. He knew what "not yet" meant. Not yet meant that the phone calls were evidence of a thing, and that the thing was, on its own, enough to end Petrillo inside the organization. But that "not yet" was not about Petrillo anymore. Not yet was about Adrian. Not yet was about building a stack of paper high enough that when the time came to put it on a table in a room full of men, nobody at the table would be able to argue with it. Because the stack would not be about loyalty, and it would not be about feelings, and it would not be about the old agreements between old men. It would be about what was on the paper, and what was on the paper would be enough. Lena spent the next 6 weeks building the stack. She did it the way Marcus had taught her to do it, which was slowly. She pulled filings. She cross-referenced bank records through a contact Ray had at a bank on Madison that Ray had not named to her, because Ray never named his contacts to anyone, which Lena had come to respect. She read every document Adrian had brought to their follow-up meeting in paper, which had turned out to be a box of 342 pages of invoices, permits, correspondence, and photographs, and she read them each twice. And she made her own notes in a green notebook that she kept in a desk drawer at the office and never took home. She found 3 things in Adrian's box that Adrian had not known he had given her. The first was a receipt from a storage facility in Secaucus under a company name Adrian had not recognized when she'd asked him about it. But the storage unit had been rented by Petrillo's son-in-law, and the rental had started the week the Bayonne permit had been pulled, which meant, almost certainly, that the storage unit contained either money or documents or both, and that one of them was going to matter. The second was an email chain between a mid-level permitting officer at the Port Authority and an address that resolved, after Teo spent 2 days with it, to a personal account belonging to Petrillo's younger brother, a man who worked in insurance in Staten Island and had no business in an email with a permitting officer about anything. The third was a photograph in a stack of 11 of a warehouse in Bayonne taken at an angle that showed, in the background, a car. The car was a black Mercedes. The license plate was partially visible. Lena enlarged the photograph on Teo's screen. Teo enhanced the plate. The plate belonged to an assistant U.S. attorney named Gabriela Sosa, out of Newark, who was, on paper, running the investigation that had resulted in the permit being pulled. Gabriela Sosa had been at the warehouse 2 weeks before the permit was pulled, with Petrillo's son-in-law. Lena had 3 separate photographs that established the timeline, from 3 different angles, taken by 3 different surveillance cameras that belonged to 3 different businesses, none of which knew they were being asked for their footage because Teo had been very careful about asking. She put all of it in a single folder. She did not give it to Marcus. Not yet. She put it in a locked drawer in her desk at the office, and she went home. And she slept 6 hours. And in the morning she called her mother, which she had started doing every Sunday now, and her mother told her about the church bake sale and about a man who had moved in across the street and seemed, in her mother's words, perfectly nice, Lena, which, at this point in my life, is the kindest thing I will say about any man out loud. And Lena laughed, and her mother laughed, and they hung up. And Lena stood in her kitchen with her hands on the counter, and she thought about the folder in the drawer, and she thought about what she was going to do with it. And she was, for the first time in 9 months, not afraid. In the meantime, Adrian had been unraveling quietly in ways that Marcus heard about before Adrian did. The shipment out of Baltimore had been seized. A cousin in Queens had been arrested. The arrest had been a small one, offender of the larger investigation, but it had been an arrest, and the cousin had been out on bail inside 36 hours, and the bail had been paid from an account Adrian had not been told about. which was the first real signal Adrian had that he was no longer the center of gravity in his own family. He had raised the matter at a dinner in Bay Ridge. An uncle had waved it off. "We handled it, Adrian. You don't need to worry about everything. That's what the rest of us are for." Adrian had smiled because he had been taught to smile, and Adrian had gone home, and Adrian had sat in the kitchen of the penthouse at 1 in the morning with a glass of water in his hand, and he had said, out loud, to no one, "They're moving around me." And Sienna, who had come out of the bedroom to get a glass of wine, had heard him and said, "What did you say?" And Adrian had said, "Nothing. Go back to bed." And Sienna had looked at him for a long moment and had gone back to bed. And Adrian had sat in the kitchen until the sky got gray. Sienna was unraveling too, in a different way. She had stopped laughing at his jokes. He had not noticed at first because she had been careful about it. The laughter had thinned by degrees, had become smaller, had become, in the last month, the polite laugh a woman gives a man at a dinner party when the man is a friend of her husband's. She had stopped reaching for him in bed. He had not noticed that either because he had also stopped reaching for her, but for different reasons, and the not reaching had become, by April, a kind of arrangement neither of them had agreed to out loud. She had started spending evenings in the second bedroom of the penthouse, which she had, in February, redecorated as a study, which she did not study in. She was on the phone a great deal in that room. Adrian, who was not a man who eavesdropped, had nonetheless walked past the door one night and heard her laugh. Not the thinning laugh. The other one. The old one. The one that had made him, at 26, sit down hard on a couch in a house in the Hamptons and know that his life was going to bend around this woman forever. She was laughing it into her phone at 11 at night in a locked room at the end of the hall, and Adrian had stood in the hallway of his own apartment with his hand flat against the door and his forehead against his hand, and he had understood, without having to make himself understand, that whatever he had given up Lena for was not going to last him the year. He had told no one. He had nowhere to tell. That was the state of Adrian Cade in the last week of May, when Marcus Hale called for a council meeting and told Denise to put Adrian on the agenda. The meeting was at the same restaurant on 34th, the same upstairs room, the same chandelier, the same long mahogany table. Petrillo was there. Oriana was there. Marasco and Chen were there. 3 other men Lena had, over the last 2 months, catalogued and understood and mostly decided she could work with. Adrian was not there at the start. Adrian had been asked to come at 9:30, which was an hour after the meeting had begun. At 9 o'clock, Marcus said, "Before Adrian gets here, Lena." Lena stood. She had not been told she was going to stand. She had been told she was going to present. Standing had come to her in the moment, because the room was long and the men at the other end of it had a habit of tuning out anyone who sat. And she had, at Oriana's quiet elbow nudge 2 meetings ago, started standing when she spoke. She opened the folder. The folder had not been in the locked drawer since Monday morning. The folder had been in Marcus's hands since Monday afternoon. Denise had made 6 copies. The 6 copies were stacked in front of Denise at the far end of the table, and when Lena nodded at her, Denise began to distribute them, one to each council member in a specific order Lena had, 2 nights before, asked Denise to follow. Petrillo received his copy 4th. "Gentlemen, Oriana, I'm going to walk you through a set of documents. I'm going to ask you not to open to page 7 until I ask you to. The reason I'm going to ask you is that page 7 is a photograph, and I'd like you to have the context before you see it." "What's this about, Lena?" Marasco said. "The Bayonne terminal." "I thought that was handled." "Several people have been told it's handled. I'm going to show you why it isn't." She walked them through the first 6 pages. She did it flatly, without inflection, the way she had learned to do it in the office, which was the way Marcus had taught her to do it, which was that the facts were more frightening when you did not try to make them frightening. Petrillo's face, at page 2, was calm. At page 4, it had tightened at the jaw. At page 6, he was not looking at his folder anymore. He was looking at Lena. "Page 7, please," Lena said. Folders opened around the table. There was a small collective intake of breath from the 3 men Lena considered workable, a longer and slower one from Oriana, and nothing at all from Petrillo, who had gone very still in a way Lena had not seen him go still before. "The car in the background, Chesa," Lena said, "is registered to an assistant U.S. attorney named Gabriela Sosa out of Newark. The man in the foreground, who is partly obscured, is Mr. Petrillo's son-in-law, Anthony Russo. The photograph was taken on March 11th. The Bayonne permit was pulled on March 26th. Pages 8, 9, and 10 are photographs of the same meeting from different angles, taken by 3 separate surveillance systems that I will not identify because the identification would put 2 small businesses at risk. Page 11 is an affidavit from Teo Abreu, who works in my office, attesting to the chain of custody of those photographs. Pages 12 through 17 are the email records between a permitting officer named Bruno Calice and an address belonging to Mr. Petrillo's brother Eugene. Pages 18 through 21 are the bank records showing a payment of $41,000 from Eugene Petrillo's account to Bruno Calice's account on March 14th, 3 days after the photograph on page 7 was taken. The room was silent. Pages 22 through 26, she said, are phone records. They show 2 calls placed from Mr. Petrillo's cell phone on April 24th, the morning after Adrian Cade met with Marcus at a restaurant in Tribeca. The first call is to Anthony Russo, Mr. Petrillo's son-in-law. The second call is to a number in Staten Island that resolves to an unlisted phone registered in the name of an aunt of Anthony Russo's who has been dead since 2019. I mention this because the phone is active, and it has been active for 3 years since the aunt's death, and it receives an average of 11 calls a week, all from numbers that, when cross-referenced, belong to law enforcement offices in 3 jurisdictions. The phone is a pass-through. The content of the April 24th call has not been recovered. The existence of the call has. Petrillo had not moved. "Mr. Petrillo," Lena said, "I'm going to give you the next 60 seconds. Anything you say in the next 60 seconds will be considered by this council before any action is taken. Anything you do not say will be considered too. I would encourage you, with respect, to say something." Petrillo looked at her. He looked at her for what felt like the full 60 seconds, though it was not. It was closer to 12. And at the end of the 12, he looked at Marcus, and Marcus did not look back at him. And at the end of that, Petrillo did something Lena had not expected, which was that he laughed. It was a short, bitter, surprised laugh, the laugh of a man who has been caught out by a person he had decided not to take seriously. And it was the laugh Lena would, years later, point to as the moment she understood the full cost of being underestimated, which was that underestimation was the most expensive compliment a man could ever pay a woman, because he paid for it with everything he had. "The nephew," Petrillo said. "Excuse me. The thing with the nephew. The lasagna. That was you." "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Petrillo. You're a goddamn liar." "Mr. Petrillo, 60 seconds. You have 41 left." Petrillo laughed again. He closed the folder in front of him. He pushed it away from himself an inch. He looked around the room at the faces of the other council members, and he saw, correctly, that none of them were looking back at him, and the not looking was the answer. And Petrillo, who had been in this kind of room for 38 years, knew the answer when he saw it. "I have nothing to say to this council," he said. "Thank you, Mr. Petrillo," Marcus said. "Marcus?" "Vincent, this is your doing." "No, it isn't. It's yours. I wouldn't take credit for your work if you offered it to me. You put her up there to do it." "I put her up there because she did it. I put her up there because she's the one who found it. I put her up there because I've been in this chair for 7 years, and I've been telling you for 5 of them that your family was a problem, and you told me I was overreacting, and now here we are, Vincent. Here we are in the only room where it matters." "You son of a bitch!" "Sit down, Vincent." Petrillo did not sit down. Petrillo stood up. Petrillo had a hand in his coat pocket, and Lena, who had been watching for it, had already taken 2 steps to her right, behind the empty chair that was waiting for Adrian, and Marcus had already nodded to Denise, and Denise had already stood up, and 2 men Lena had never seen before had already walked into the room from the hallway and were standing, very quietly, at the 2 doors. "Vincent," Marcus said, "take your hand out of your pocket, slowly, please." Petrillo took his hand out of his pocket. His hand was empty. He had not been reaching for anything. He had only been, Lena realized, steadying himself. "You're a fool, Marcus." "I might be, Vincent, but I'm not your fool, and I'm not your father's fool, and I'm not Adrian's father's fool, and if you leave this room in the next 90 seconds, I will consider our business finished, and you will retire to Florida, and your family will keep what is currently in their names, and the paperwork on your son-in-law will sit in my office and not go anywhere. If you don't leave in 90 seconds, we'll have a different conversation. It's your pick." Petrillo left. He did not say goodbye. He did not look at Lena as he walked past her. At the door, one of the two men Lena did not recognize put a hand on Petrillo's shoulder, briefly, the way you put a hand on the shoulder of an old friend you are walking out of a room with. And Petrillo nodded, and the three of them went down the stairs. And the sound of their feet on the wooden stairs went on for a long time in the quiet of the upstairs room. Oriana cleared her throat. "Well," she said. "Well," Marcus said. "That was efficient." "It was Lena's work." "It was Lena's work," Oriana agreed. She looked at Lena. Oriana's face did a thing Lena had not seen it do before. A small adjustment at the eyes, not a smile, but the cousin of a smile. The thing a smile would grow up into if it were raised carefully. "You'll take his chair," Oriana said. "If this council would have me." "We'll have you. Move your folder down one seat." Lena moved her folder down one seat. The chair she sat in was still warm from a man who would not be sitting in it again. She did not know what to do with the warmth. She sat in it anyway. "And now," Oriana said, "the other problem." "Adrian," Marcus said. "Adrian." Marcus looked at his watch. "He's due in 4 minutes. Lena will stay for this. She knows the file. She'll speak when spoken to. Everyone else stays silent unless I ask you to contribute. Are we clear?" They were clear. But Geishia. Adrian came up the stairs at 9:31. He was alone this time. He had not been told he could bring anyone. He came into the room in a gray suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone, and he stopped inside the door when he saw the room, and he took it in. The folders on the table, the empty chair Lena had moved out of, the way the men at the table were arranged, the fact that Petrillo was not there. "Marcus, Adrian, where's Vincent?" "Vincent's retired." Adrian's face did a thing. It was a small thing. He handled it well. He had been raised to handle these things well. He walked to the chair Marcus indicated with a small gesture of his hand, and he sat in it, and he put his hands flat on the table in front of him in a way that Lena, watching, recognized, because he had sat with his hands flat on a table like that at a restaurant in Tribeca 6 weeks ago, and the sitting, she understood now, was the thing he did when he was trying very hard not to be afraid. "Adrian," Marcus said, "I'm going to tell you where we are. I'm going to tell you simply, and I'm going to ask you not to interrupt, and at the end of it, I'm going to ask you one question, and the rest of your life is going to depend on your answer. Is that acceptable?" Yes. Vincent Petrillo was, as you suspected, the source of the leaks at Bayonne. He was working with Assistant U.S. Attorney Gabriela Sosa. He has been removed from this organization as of 12 minutes ago. The removal was achieved through documentation assembled by Ms. Voss with support from my office. Your shipment out of Baltimore was seized because of intelligence Vincent provided to Ms. Sosa in January. Your cousin Lorenzo was arrested for the same reason. Vincent's intention was not to destroy your organization. It was to inherit it. He'd been positioning his son-in-law Anthony to take your position within 18 months. The timeline was aggressive but feasible. He was not going to succeed, but he did not know that. Adrian's hands had not moved. They were still flat on the table. A muscle in his cheek moved. In the course of this work, Marcus said, Ms. Voss also identified a series of financial movements inside your organization that do not originate with Vincent. I'll be frank with you. There is another leak. It's smaller. It's not coordinated with law enforcement. It's coordinated with a competitor, and the competitor is being fed information about your schedule, your movements, your social calendar, and your personal life. The feed has been going on for approximately 4 months. The feed is coming from inside your household. I'm not going to tell you who. You're going to figure that out because it's not my job to do it for you, and because it is going to matter, very much, that you figure it out yourself. Cool? Simple. Adrian did not move. The question, Marcus said, is this. Are you going to remain the head of your organization? Adrian looked at him. That's not a question you get to ask. It's the only question on the table. I'm not asking whether I will remove you. I don't have the authority to remove you, and I wouldn't use it if I did. I'm asking whether you're going to remain the head, because the answer determines what this council does next, and what this council does next determines what your family does next, and what your family does next determines, among other things, whether your mother spends the next decade at the house in Sag Harbor, or whether she spends it selling that house to pay your legal bills. So I'm asking, are you going to remain? Yes. Are you sure? Yes, Marcus, I'm sure. All right, Lena, tell him what he'll need to do. Lena opened a second folder. She had not shown Adrian this folder. She had prepared it 3 nights before, at her kitchen table, over a bowl of pasta that had gone cold beside her. "Mr. Cade," she said. He looked at her. Something moved in his face when she called him that. She noticed. She did not acknowledge it. 5 things. In order. First, you will dismiss Anthony Russo from any role in your organization by the end of this week. The dismissal will be permanent, and it will be made clear to him that he is not to do business with anyone in this room. Second, you will close the storage facility in Secaucus under the name Harbor Row Logistics. The contents of the unit will be surrendered to this council for review. If the contents turn out to be what I think they are, they will be returned to you minus a percentage. If they turn out to be something else, we will discuss it at that time. Third, you will restructure your relationship with the permitting officer Bruno Calise immediately, because Calise is going to be approached by federal investigators within the next 10 days, and he is going to talk. And when he talks, he is going to name you, and your response to that naming needs to be in place before he does. Fourth, you will identify the leak inside your household, and you will resolve it in a way that does not involve this council, but that also does not leave us exposed. Fifth, you will not contact me or anyone in Marcus's office outside of channels for the next 6 months. If you need to communicate, you will communicate through Denise. Am I clear? Yes. Do you agree? Yes. Out loud, Mr. Cade, for the room. He looked at her. She thought for a second that he was not going to do it. She thought he was going to push back, out of pride, out of habit, out of the muscle memory of a man who had been obeyed since he was 17 years old. But he did not push back. He looked at her, and he looked at Marcus, and he looked at Oriana, and he saw the room for what it was, which was a room that had already made its decision and was only waiting for him to get out of its way. I agree, he said. To all 5. Thank you, Lena said. That's all, Marcus said. Go home, Adrian. We'll see you in 6 months. Adrian stood. He did not shake anyone's hand. He walked to the door. At the door, he stopped. He turned. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at Lena. Lena. Mr. Cade. Walk me downstairs. The room went quiet again in the particular way it had gone quiet when Petrillo had mentioned her husband months ago at the first meeting. It was a silence that was not hostile, but was attentive. The silence of men who have been in a lot of rooms and are waiting to see which kind of room this one turns into. She looked at Marcus. Marcus did not look back. Marcus had decided at some point in the last 15 minutes that this was her call and that he was not going to make it for her. All right, she said. They went down the stairs. The stairs creaked. She did not speak on the way down, and neither did he. On the sidewalk outside the restaurant, he stopped under the awning in the small, dry square of concrete where the rain that had started during the meeting could not reach him, and he looked at her, and for a long moment he did not speak. And when he did speak, his voice was different from the voice he had used upstairs. It was a voice she had not heard from him in nearly a year. You built that. I did. All of it. Yes. The nephew, the bookmaker, the whole thing. You put Petrillo in a box and you walked him into it and you closed the lid. Yes. Jesus. Adrian. Lena. I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to go back upstairs because they're waiting for me. You're not going to call me. You're not going to find an excuse to run into me. You're not going to send me a letter in 3 months when you're drunk at a wedding and thinking about the one in November. If you do any of those things, I'm going to stop protecting you, and you need to understand that I have been protecting you. I didn't need to walk Petrillo's crimes in through your office. I could have walked them in through yours. I chose not to because the council does not need a second vacant chair tonight, and because your mother does not deserve to sell the house in Sag Harbor. That's not a favor I did for you. That's a calculation I made. If you mistake it for a favor, the calculation changes. He looked at her. His face did the thing she had watched it do twice before. The flinch at the corner of the mouth. The quarter-inch adjustment of a man discovering that a structure he had been living inside had holes in it. She's cheating on me. Adrian, don't. It's him. It's the man she left the country for. He came back a month after she did. I didn't know. She didn't tell me. She's been seeing him since February. It's him, Lena. That's the leak. It's her. She looked at him for a long time. The rain had picked up, and she could hear it on the awning above them, and she could feel, through the soles of her shoes, the cold of the concrete that had been cold for a long time before she stood on it, and would be cold for a long time after she was gone. "I know," she said. I've known for 3 weeks. Marcus has known for 6. We didn't tell you because telling you before the council meeting would have changed your behavior in that room, and we needed your behavior in that room to be what it was. I'm telling you now because you're going to figure it out inside a week anyway, and because you'll handle it better if you have 20 minutes to sit with it before you go upstairs to your apartment tonight. That's the last thing I'm going to do for you, Adrian. That 20 minutes. We're square after this." He was quiet for a long time. "I deserved that," he said. "Which part?" "All of it. The whole—" "I deserved it, Lena. I didn't know I did. I thought I knew what I was doing when I wrote those papers. I thought I was being... I told myself so many stories. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You don't need to hear it." "No, I don't. I'm sorry." "I know. Does that matter to you?" "Not anymore. It would have in January. It would have mattered a lot in January. It doesn't now. That's not meanness. That's just a thing that's true. I'm not the same person I was in January. The person who needed your apology doesn't live in me anymore. She moved out. I don't know where she went. I don't miss her." He nodded. He kept nodding, small and slow, looking at the wet sidewalk. "Go home, Adrian." "Yeah." "Take care of your mother." "Yeah." "Don't do anything stupid tonight." "I won't." "Good." She turned to go back up the stairs. She was at the door of the restaurant when he said her name again, and she stopped, and she did not turn around because she knew what he was going to say, and she did not need to watch his face when he said it. "Lena." "What?" "I thought I was saving you." "From what?" "From the life I was going to have. I thought if it got bad, if any of the things that are happening now had happened to you, I wouldn't have been able to live with it. I told myself I was being kind. I was scared of what you might have to carry. I was scared of it, Lena. I wasn't cruel. I was a coward, and I dressed it up as something else, and I put it on your wedding dress, and I sent you home in a cab. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm saying it out loud because you were right. In the restaurant, when you said I'd confused being scared with being sorry. I don't want to leave the block tonight without saying it to you." She stood with her hand on the door. She could have said a lot of things. She could have told him that cowardice dressed as kindness was still cowardice, and that the difference between being scared and being cruel from the passenger seat was 0. She could have told him that the version of her who could be saved by a man deciding to save her had died in a penthouse 8 months ago, and that the version of her who was standing on this sidewalk did not need saving, had never needed saving, and that the saving he had imagined himself doing had been a story he told himself because the real story, that he had wanted another woman and had taken her and had dressed the taking up in the language of protection, had been too small a story for him to tell out loud. She thought about saying all of that. She did not say it. "Good night, Adrian," she said, and she opened the door and she went up the stairs, and when she got to the top, the room was waiting for her, and Marcus looked up, and Oriana looked up, and the other men at the table looked up, and Lena Voss sat down in the chair that had been Vincent Petrillo's, and she picked up her folder, and she turned to page 27, which was a page she had not shown anyone yet, and she said, "There's one more thing I'd like to discuss while we're all still in the room." And the men at the table leaned forward, because they had, in the last 2 hours, learned that when Lena Voss said one more thing, you leaned forward. Page 27 was a proposal, not a problem, and that was the part Lena had saved for last, because she had learned in Marcus's office that the order in which you put things in front of a room was itself an argument. You walked people through the fire, and you let them smell the smoke, and then, when they were still breathing hard, you put the thing you actually wanted in their hands, and they held it harder than they would have held it if you had given it to them first. What she wanted that night was simple. She wanted the council to restructure. 9 men, she said, and Oriana, and now me. That's 11. 11 is a bad number, because 11 splits into a 6 and a 5 on any important vote, and a 6-5 vote is not a decision, it's a fight that gets scheduled for the next meeting. I'd like to propose we go to 7. Not by removing anyone in this room, by letting the chairs in this room be the only chairs, and by dissolving the side arrangements that two of you still have with men who aren't here tonight. I won't name them. You know who you are. You've been good to this council. You've also been running parallel tracks, and the parallel tracks were fine when Vincent was in his chair, because Vincent's whole job was to make sure parallel tracks existed. Vincent isn't in his chair anymore. I'd like to close the tracks. She sat down when she was done. She had learned from Oriana to stand when you opened and to sit when you closed, because standing made men listen and sitting made them answer. The answering took 45 minutes. Marasco argued first because Marasco argued first about everything. Chen argued second, more quietly, and his quiet was more effective than Marasco's loudness, because Chen was right about half of what he said and knew it. Oriana listened and said nothing for a long time and then said, "At the end, Lena is correct," and that was the end of the argument. They voted. It was not unanimous, because nothing in that room was ever unanimous, but it was 8-3, and the three knew they had lost before the count was finished. And by the time they were pouring whiskeys at the sideboard, the three had already started calling it our new arrangement, as if they had voted for it, which was, Marcus had told her once, how men in rooms like that lived with losses. By renaming them, quickly, before anyone could remember what they had been called before. Lena did not drink the whiskey. She drank the water. She had learned that part months ago. At 11:40, she walked down the stairs with Marcus and Denise. The rain had stopped. The street smelled the way Manhattan smells after a late spring rain, which is to say, the street smelled of things that should not have been smelled together. Wet garbage, wet flowers from a bodega a block over, exhaust, bread from a bakery that baked at night. Marcus lit a cigarette. He had not smoked in front of her before. She did not remark on it. "Long night," he said. "Long night." "You did good. Thank you." "Denise, get us a car. I want to drop Lena home." Denise got a car. They rode uptown in the quiet, and Marcus smoked his cigarette out the cracked window, and the cab driver did not complain because the cab was not a cab, it was a town car, and the man behind the wheel had driven Marcus before and knew the rules. At her building, Marcus did not get out. He rolled down the window. "Lena." "Yes." "Take Monday off." "I have 3 things on Monday." "Move them. Take Monday off." "Go see your mother. Eat something she cooks. Don't think about the council. Don't think about Adrian. I'll see you Tuesday." "Okay." "Good." She watched the car pull away. She stood on the sidewalk for a minute in the damp air. A woman in her 60s walked past with a small dog on a long leash, and the woman smiled at her, and Lena smiled back, and the woman said, "Good evening," and Lena said, "Good evening," and it was a thing so ordinary that it should not have meant anything, but it meant something, because a year ago a woman walking a dog would not have looked at her and smiled, because a year ago Lena's face had been the face of a woman that strangers avoided, and now it was the face of a woman that strangers nodded at, which was, she understood, a thing that had happened to her without her working for it. A thing that had happened because she had stopped carrying a weight on her jaw that she had not known she was carrying. She went upstairs. She slept 10 hours. She went to see her mother on Monday. Her mother made meatballs. Her mother made meatballs because her mother had only 3 things she made when she wanted to communicate something to Lena that she was not going to say out loud, and meatballs were the most serious of the 3. Lena sat at the kitchen table and watched her mother stand at the stove in the blue apron she had worn for 20 years, and her mother, without turning around, said, "Your aunt called me." "Which aunt?" "Marie." "Of course, Marie." "What did she want?" "She wanted to know if you were in trouble." "Am I in trouble, Mom?" "That's what I asked her. She said somebody told somebody at a funeral on Saturday that you'd been seen at a restaurant in the city with some people, and that the people were a certain kind of people, and that they'd heard you'd been keeping a certain kind of company, and so on and so on. Lena, I don't have to tell you how Marie's sentences go." "What did you tell her?" Her mother turned around. She had a wooden spoon in her hand. The wooden spoon was the same spoon she had used to stir sauce when Lena was 7 years old. And the spoon had, at some point between then and now, developed a small burn on the handle from being left against a hot pot. And Lena, sitting at the table, felt a very small clean pain go through her at the sight of the burn, because the spoon had outlived her father and was going to outlive her mother and would probably outlive her, and that was, she thought, a reasonable thing to cry about if she had been the kind of woman who still cried. "I told her," her mother said, that my daughter was working for a decent man, and that she was fine, and that if Marie called me again to gossip about you, I would stop answering the phone on Sunday afternoons, which is, as Marie well knows, the only afternoon she has nothing else to do. Lena laughed. I mean it, Lena. I know you mean it. Are you in trouble? No, Mom. I'm not in trouble. Are you going to be? Lena thought about it. She thought about it honestly, which she had, in the last 9 months, become much better at doing than she had been before. I don't think so. Not in the way she means. The work I do it's on the edge of some things. I'm not going to lie to you about that, but it's not the thing she thinks it is. I don't carry anything. I don't hurt anyone. I read papers. I sit in rooms. I help people decide things. Is he good to you? Who? The man you work for. Yes. Is he good to you the way a man is good to a woman, or the way a boss is good to an employee? The second one, Mom. Because you've got a look in your eyes about him. I do not. Lena. I don't, Mom. He's not that. We're not that. He's been clean about it since the day I walked into his office. If he has a feeling about me, he keeps it to himself, and I keep mine to myself. And if we ever stop doing that, it will be because one of us has stopped being able to work with the other one, and neither of us is interested in that. That's all. Her mother stirred the sauce. Her mother stirred the sauce for a long time. When your father was courting me, her mother said, he worked at a garage on Jericho Turnpike. He was 23. He was nothing to look at. He had hands like somebody had been hitting them with a hammer for 10 years, which actually was not far from the truth. He brought me flowers on the third date. Daisies. Not roses. Roses he couldn't afford, and he wouldn't pretend. I told my mother about him that night. My mother said, Ellen, is he good to you? And I said, Ma, he brought me daisies, and he didn't lie about the daisies. And my mother said, that'll do. She died the next year. I never got to tell her he stayed good. I'm saying this because I want you to understand that the bar for a man is very low. The bar is, does he tell the truth about the daisies? If he tells the truth about the daisies, you have something. If he doesn't, you don't. That's the whole bar. Dumpit sanitz. Mom. Yes. Marcus tells the truth about the daisies. All right, sweetheart. It's still not what you think it is. I didn't say it was. You did a little. I said you had a look. A look is not an accusation, Lena. It's a look. Come eat. They ate. They ate the meatballs, and they ate the pasta, and they ate the bread her mother had bought at the place on Route 25 that Lena's father had liked, and they drank 2 glasses of wine each, which Lena had not done with her mother since she had been 18, and her mother had poured her a glass at Christmas and said, You're old enough, and it's a holiday, and I'd rather you drink it with me than sneak it with your cousins in the garage. They did not talk about the council, or about Adrian, or about the restaurant on 34th Street, or about Vincent Petrillo going to Florida, or about Sienna, whose name Lena's mother did not know. They talked about the man who had moved in across the street, who had turned out to be a retired high school principal from Queens, and who had, in her mother's words, a quiet way about him that I don't dislike. They talked about a niece who was getting married in August, and about whether Lena would go to the wedding, and Lena said she would, and her mother said, bring somebody, and Lena said, I don't have anybody to bring, Mom, and her mother said, then come alone, and dance with your cousins, and eat cake, and don't let anybody ask you about November. Nobody's going to ask me about November, Mom. Lena, it's an Italian wedding on Long Island. They'll ask. They'll ask. What do I say? You say, I'm working, I'm happy, pass the champagne. You say it with a smile. You say it twice. After you say it twice, they stop asking. They stop asking because you've given them nothing to chew on. Men like Adrian only have power over women when women feed the story. You don't feed the story starves. Lena looked at her mother across the kitchen table. Her mother was 63 years old. Her mother had buried a husband and raised a daughter and survived a wedding that had not become a wedding. And her mother, in a blue apron over a brown sweater with a small stain of sauce on one cuff, had just given her better advice than Lena had received from anyone in Marcus's office in a year. Mom. Yeah. I love you. I know. I mean it. Lena, I know. Eat your bread. She went to the wedding in August. She wore a green dress. She danced with her cousins. She ate cake. 3 people asked her about November. She gave each of them the answer her mother had given her, and the first one said, "Well, as long as you're happy, sweetheart." And the second one said, "That bastard." And the third one said, "I heard he's gotten fat." And Lena laughed at the third one, honestly. And her cousin, who had been standing nearby, laughed too. And the aunt who had said it smiled in satisfaction because she had gotten a laugh out of the niece she had been worried about. And that was the end of it. Nobody asked her again for the rest of the night. Her mother had been right. The story had starved. She did not know, at the wedding, that Adrian was at a different wedding that same weekend, on the other side of the country, in a small chapel in Santa Barbara, where his brother Nicholas was marrying a woman named Ruth, whom Nicholas had been with for 11 years. Adrian had gone alone. Sienna had not come. Sienna was not with Adrian anymore. Sienna had, in June, in a way that was not quiet, moved out of the penthouse and into an apartment in a building that Adrian did not know the address of, with a man whose name Adrian knew very well, because it was the name of the man Sienna had loved for 9 years before Adrian, and the name of the man she would love for whatever was left. Adrian did not hate her for it. That surprised him. He had expected to hate her because he had watched his father hate women for smaller things, and he had been raised to believe that hating a woman who left you was the floor of manhood. But when Sienna had left, on a Tuesday afternoon in June, with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, and had stood in the foyer of the penthouse and said, "Adrian, I'm sorry. I am so deeply sorry. I thought I could do this, and I can't." He had looked at her, and he had felt nothing but a dull, clear sadness. And he had said, "I know you're sorry, Sienna. Go." She had cried. He had not. She had closed the door behind her, and he had walked to the window, and he had looked out at the city, and he had thought very clearly of Lena in a wedding dress in that same foyer 9 months earlier. And for the first time in his adult life, he had cried not for himself, but for another person. And the other person was a woman he was never going to see again. He had pulled himself together in the months after that, in the way he had pulled himself together after his father's death, which was to say with difficulty and without grace. He had done the 5 things Lena had told him to do in the restaurant on 34th. He had done them on time. He had taken the phone call from the federal investigators when it came for Bruno Calise, and he had handled it the way he had been prepared to handle it, which was to say he had handled it survivably. He had dismissed Anthony Russo. He had surrendered the storage unit in Secaucus. He had found the leak in his household, and he had resolved it in a way that did not require Marcus Hale's help, which was, in the end, the thing he was most quietly proud of, not because the resolution had been admirable, but because it had been his. He had, in October, stepped down from the day-to-day operation of his father's organization and retained only a ceremonial title. He had moved to a house in Rhinebeck that had belonged to his grandmother. He had started reading, seriously, for the first time in his adult life, history mostly, and biographies of men who had lost more than they had won. He had seen his mother once a week. He had learned to cook 3 dishes. He had, the following spring, gone to a marriage counselor in Kingston who had not asked him any questions about his past and had instead asked him what he wanted his next 10 years to look like. And Adrian had said, "Quiet." And the counselor had said, "That's a good answer, and it's harder than it sounds." And Adrian had laughed, for the first time in a very long time, because the counselor had been right. He would not, in this life, get to apologize to Lena in any way that she would accept. He understood that. He understood, further, that it was right that he did not get to, that some apologies were not for the person who had been wronged, but for the person who had done the wronging, and that those apologies were best done in private, over years, through the small, steady labor of not becoming, again, the man who had done the wronging. He did that labor. He did it imperfectly, because no man does it any other way. He became, by slow degrees, a better version of a man he was never going to fully forgive himself for having been. That was the most he was going to get. He took it. Lena did not know about any of that. She did not need to. She had, in September of her first full year on the council, taken Vincent Petrillo's chair, and by the following January she had taken the seat next to Marcus that Oriana had, at a private dinner, asked her to take. She did not know at the dinner that Oriana was doing her a larger kindness than the seat represented. She would come to understand it later. Oriana had been, for 15 years, the only woman in that room. Oriana had carried the weight of being the only woman, which was a weight Lena had, in her first 6 months, only begun to feel the edges of. When Oriana moved Lena next to Marcus, Oriana was splitting the weight, quietly, in a way that no man in the room would ever recognize or acknowledge. It was the kind of thing women did for each other in rooms full of men. It was the kind of thing Lena would, 5 years later, do for another woman she had not met yet, without being asked, because Oriana had done it first. Marcus did not say anything about the seat change when it happened. Marcus rarely said anything about anything Oriana did because Marcus had, a long time ago, learned that Oriana's decisions were usually correct, and that commenting on them only made them look less so. What he did say, 2 weeks after the seat change, was, "Lena, there's a file on my desk I'd like you to read tonight. It's the Nassau County matter. I've been sitting on it for 6 months. I think you see it better than I do. Tell me in the morning what you think we should do." She took the file. She read it that night. She brought it back in the morning with a page of notes paperclipped to the front, and Marcus read her notes, and Marcus looked up at her, and Marcus said, "How long have you been reading me, Lena?" And Lena said, "Since March, Marcus." And Marcus nodded, and Marcus said, "All right. From now on, you see everything I see first. We'll adjust the titles when Denise writes up the quarterly. You'll tell me what you want yours to be. Don't pick something cute. Pick something that gets you into the rooms you want to be in." She picked a title. It was not cute. It got her into the rooms. Within 18 months, she was walking into those rooms ahead of Marcus instead of behind him, and Marcus, who had been quietly preparing for that moment for 3 years, did not complain, because Marcus was not a man who complained when things he had planned came to pass. It was not a fairy tale. It was not a clean arc. There were, in those years, nights when she could not sleep, and mornings when she walked into her office and found that Denise had put a cup of coffee on her desk and closed the door and told the rest of the office to give Lena an hour before anyone spoke to her, because Denise had known, before Lena had, that Lena was having a bad day. There were bad days. There were days when she thought about Adrian and felt a hot, small anger that she had believed had gone away, and had to sit with it, and had to wait for it to pass. There were days when she thought about her father and cried at her desk with the door closed, and Denise pretended not to notice when she came out with her eyes red. There was a Thursday in November, 3 years after the wedding that had not been a wedding, when Marcus called her into his office and closed the door and sat down across from her and said, "I'm going to retire." She did not speak for a moment. "When?" she said. "Next year, June. I've been thinking about it for a while. I told Oriana last week. I'm telling you now." "Okay. I'd like you to take the chair." "Marcus." "I know." "The council won't." "The council will. Oriana's already said she'll move for it. Chen will second. Marasco will grumble for a month and then come around. The only one who'd have been a problem was Vincent, and Vincent's retired." "Marcus, I'm 31 years old." "I was 32 when I took it. You're a year ahead of me." "That's not the same thing." "It isn't. I know it isn't. But it's the right call. I've had 3 years to watch you in that room, Lena. You read a room better than I do. You've always read a room better than I do. The only thing I had on you when you walked into my office that first day was experience. And experience is the one thing that comes whether you want it to or not. I'm handing it to you now." She sat with it. She did not answer right away. She watched the light on his desk, which was a green-shaded banker's lamp that had been there every day of the 4 years she had known him. And she watched his hands, which were older than they had been 4 years ago. And she thought about the photograph she had once seen in his drawer, of a woman and a child, about whom he had never spoken to her, about whom she had never asked. "Marcus." "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to retire, Lena." "To where?" "A lake in Vermont. I bought a house. I bought it 2 years ago. I haven't slept in it yet. I think I'd like to sleep in it now. Alone. Alone. Are you all right?" He looked at her. Something in his face softened. He did not often allow anything in his face to soften. She had seen it exactly twice before, once at a train window and once at a benefit at a museum, and she counted this as the third. "I'm tired, Lena. That's all. I'm not sick. I'm not sad. I'm tired. I've been doing this since I was 28, and I'm 57 now, and I'd like to spend whatever time I have left listening to water hit a dock. That's not a crisis. That's a reasonable request." "It is." "Will you take the chair?" "Yes." "Good. That's done then. We'll tell the council in January. You'll spend the next 5 months shadowing me on the things you haven't shadowed me on yet. Which isn't many. You'll be fine. She stood up to leave. At the door, she stopped. She turned. Marcus? Yes. Why did you pick me up? He looked at her. From Paul, she said, 4 years ago. You wrote me a letter. I never asked you. Why me? You had no reason to. He was quiet for a long moment. He looked down at his desk. He looked at his hands. He looked at the banker's lamp, which had been a gift from someone, she did not know who, and then he looked back up at her. My sister, he said. Your sister. Her name was Maria. She was my older sister. She married a man like Adrian, only poorer and meaner. She had a daughter. The daughter was 2 years old when Maria tried to leave. The man did not let her leave. He didn't do it with his hands. He did it with money and with her family and with the police in the town they were in, who were his friends. She was trapped for 11 years. She died, Lena. In a way I'm not going to describe to you because you don't need it, and because I don't talk about it, and because if I start talking about it, I will not stop. Her daughter, my niece, is the child in the photograph I keep in my drawer. She's a woman now. She lives in Oregon. She's a teacher. She's all right. That's the end of the story. He looked at her. When Paul called me about you, he said, I had not picked up a woman in your situation in 7 years. I had stopped. I had decided that the work I do is the work I do, and that the work I do is not a rescue operation, and that every time I pretended it was, I did badly by the woman and badly by myself. You were the first one I broke that rule for. I don't know why. You were in the letter Paul sent me. There was a line in the letter. I read the line 3 times. That was all. What was the line? The line was, she didn't cry when he told her. Paul had heard it from the lawyer's office that had drawn up Adrian's papers. The lawyer had reported back that you had sat there, and you had read the papers, and you had taken off the ring, and you had left the ring on the folder, and you had gotten in an elevator. And Paul had underlined that sentence, and Paul had written in the margin, might be worth a look. And I had read it, and I had thought of my sister, who had cried when her husband told her, because she had been 22 and alone, and had not known yet that crying was a thing men took from you and spent. And I thought, if this woman didn't cry, she is either already broken past the point of tears, in which case we will find out quickly, and I will refer her to someone who can take care of her, or she is a woman who has understood, at the exact moment she should have been least able to understand, that her tears were not currency in that room. I came to find out which. That's all it was. That's the whole answer. She stood in the doorway. She did not cry. She had by then long since stopped crying at things that had moved her, which was a thing she had learned from the work, and a thing she had, in quiet moments, wondered whether she ought to unlearn. She would, years later. Not that day. Marcus. Yes. Thank you. Lena. Yes. Don't thank me. Do the work. The work is the thank you. The chair is the thank you. Keep it clean. Keep the room clean. Don't pick up a woman in a bad marriage unless you can afford to be wrong about her. Don't be wrong about her. That's it. That's the whole lesson. Close the door on your way out. She closed the door on her way out. What? She took the chair in June. The council met in the same room above the restaurant on 34th Street, and Marcus sat at the end of the table for the last time. And when the vote was called, Oriana moved and Chen seconded, and Marasco, who had been grumbling for 5 months exactly as Marcus had predicted, voted yes. The vote was unanimous. Marcus had arranged it so. He had called every member in the week before, privately, and had made clear that a split vote would be regarded by him as a personal disappointment, and none of the men in that room had any interest in being a personal disappointment to Marcus Hale on his last day in the chair. Lena sat in it. It was not warm the way Vincent Petrio's chair had been warm, because Marcus had gotten up a half hour earlier and had gone to stand by the window while the vote was taken, and had let the chair cool on purpose, which was a kindness Lena did not understand until she sat in it and found it cool, and understood then that he had not wanted her first seconds in that chair to feel like anybody else's. She ran the meeting. She ran it the way she had watched him run them, which was quietly, without drama, letting the men argue until they had argued themselves into the answer she had already decided on. It took 2 hours. At the end of it, Marcus stood up and walked around the table and took her hand, once, briefly, the first and only time he ever touched her, and said, I'll be on the train tomorrow. Denise has my address. Don't send me any files. Send me a postcard at Christmas. Don't call me about work. Call me about anything else. I will. Good girl. Marcus. Yeah. The daisies. He looked at her. She had never told him what her mother had said in the kitchen 4 years before. She had never told anyone. But Marcus Hale, who had read her for 4 years, had read her then, and he had smiled, and the smile was the second real one she had ever gotten from him, and the last. I know, Lena, he said. I know. He left. He got on a train the next morning to Vermont, and he sent her a postcard at Christmas, and he sent her another one the Christmas after that. And the Christmas after that the postcard did not come, and Denise, who handled these things, called the number she had for the house on the lake, and the woman who answered the phone was a neighbor, and the neighbor told her gently, in the voice neighbors use for this kind of call, that Marcus had died in his sleep in late November, peacefully, and that a small service had been held, and that a sealed envelope had been left for a woman named Lena Voss to be mailed in January if nobody came to collect it. Nobody had come. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Lena opened it at her desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 3 sentences. Lena, the chair is yours. Don't be wrong about her. She read it. She read it 3 times. She put the paper in the drawer of her desk, under the file that had, 4 years before, been her first assignment, the folder with the sticky note that said LV in blue pen, which she had kept, and which she would keep for the rest of her working life. She closed the drawer. She closed her door. She cried for 15 minutes, which was the first time she had cried at her desk since the morning after the museum benefit, and Denise, who was at her own desk outside, knew and did not come in, and made sure nobody else came in either, which was the kind of thing Denise had done for Marcus for 22 years and would now do for her for however many years were left of Denise wanting to work, which turned out to be 9 more. And then Denise retired to a small house in the Poconos with a woman she had been quietly with for 30 years, whom Lena had never met, and who turned out to be, when Lena finally met her, a retired schoolteacher with a loud laugh and a garden full of tomatoes. Babashi. Lena ran the council for 11 years. She did not marry. She did not marry. She was, for most of those 11 years, too busy to make the kind of choice about a man that required sitting still. In the 12th year, at a dinner at Oriana's apartment, she met a man named David who made furniture in a shop in Red Hook, and who did not know what she did for a living for the first 4 months she was with him, and who, when he found out, looked at her for a long moment and said, "Huh," and then asked her if she wanted another glass of wine. They were together for 6 years. They were not together after that, in a way that did not hurt either of them very much, because they were both, by then, old enough to know the difference between a love that had ended and a love that had completed itself. She kept the chair he had made her. She sat in it, in her apartment, every Sunday morning, and read the paper. She did not see Adrian again. She heard about him, in the ordinary way one hears about people one used to know. He remarried, eventually, to a woman he had met at his brother's second wedding, a pediatrician from Boston named Teresa, who had no idea who he had been and who did not particularly care to learn. They had 2 children. He was, by all accounts, a good father, which was a word Lena would not have predicted for him on the night of the papers, and which she was, by the time she heard it, glad to hear. She did not begrudge him the second chance. She had, by then, come to understand that begrudging other people their second chances was a way of refusing your own. Her mother lived to 79. She died on a Sunday afternoon in the same kitchen where she had made the meatballs, with Lena on one side of her and the retired principal from across the street, who had, in the intervening decade, become her mother's companion in a way that was never quite defined out loud, on the other. It was a quiet death. Lena had not known a death could be quiet. She had buried her father at 17 in what had felt like a storm, and she buried her mother at 38 in what felt like a long afternoon. And the long afternoon was, she decided on the drive home, the better way. She kept the wooden spoon. She used it. It still had the burn on the handle. She was 51 years old on the evening of the anniversary. Not the anniversary of the wedding. The anniversary of the night in the penthouse. She had not marked it for a long time, for many years in a row, because marking it had felt like letting it matter, and letting it matter had felt like a failure. But at 51, she had started marking it quietly, the way a person marks the day they came through a surgery. She bought herself a small bouquet of daisies from a bodega on her way home from the office. She put the daisies in a glass on her kitchen table. She made a simple dinner. She sat down. She ate. Halfway through the meal, she stopped. She looked at the daisies. She looked at the kitchen. She looked at her own hands, which had, over 25 years, become hands she knew, lined, steady, capable of the work she had taught them. She thought about the woman who had sat on the floor of a rented apartment in a wedding dress and had not known whether she would ever eat another meal she wanted to eat. She thought about the cab driver in the Mets cap who had said, "Get in. We'll figure it out." She thought about Paul Albright, who had died of a heart attack in his office at 71 with his shoes off, the way he had always worked. She thought about Marcus on a train to Vermont. She thought about Oriana, who was still alive, and who sent her a card every year on her birthday with nothing written inside it but a single O. She thought about Denise in the Poconos with her tomatoes. She thought about her mother at the stove, saying, "Does he tell the truth about the daisies?" She thought about Adrian, who she had not thought about in a long time, and who, when she thought about him now, she thought about the way a person thinks about weather in a country she had left. She had not been saved. She had been noticed. There was a difference, and the difference had been the whole thing. She thought about the young woman she was going to meet the next morning, a 26-year-old researcher, new to the firm, who had been through something that was not Lena's business to know the shape of in full, and who had, in her first 3 weeks, handed in work that made Lena put the folder down and go stand at her window for a long moment. The young woman's name was Alicia. Lena had, that afternoon, asked Denise's successor to move Alicia's desk next to hers. She had not told Alicia yet. She had not told anyone yet. She would tell her in the morning, and Alicia would not understand what was being done for her. And that was all right, because Lena had not understood, at 26, what was being done for her either. Understanding came later, if it came. What was needed now was the desk. Lena finished her dinner. She washed the dish. She put the daisies on the windowsill where she could see them from the chair David had made her. She sat in the chair. She read for a while. At 11, she turned off the lamp. Somewhere in the city, in some apartment, or some suite, or some kitchen she would never see, another woman was having the worst night of her life. And that woman did not know yet that she was going to be all right. Lena could not help her. Lena did not know her. But Lena knew what she knew, which was that the worst nights ended, and that the ending did not look usually like rescue. The ending looked like a cab driver in a Mets cap, and a lawyer with old blue eyes, and a letter slid under a door by a man who had lost a sister, and a wooden spoon with a burn on the handle, and a seat at a table that somebody else had kept warm or cool on purpose. For you. The ending looked like a life you built out of things other people had thrown away, and the throwing away, in the end, was the only gift they would ever give you, which was that they had shown you, early, what you were not going to be. She had not been saved. She had become. That was the whole difference, and it was all the difference there was. She turned over. She closed her eyes. She slept.